I got, get this, being the idiot that I am, I got the ATM Mini Pro, the ISO version.
Okay.
Ooh.
So it's like a little tiny mini TV studio. It's complete overkill, but it just allows multiple HDMI's, right?
Oh, so you got the one that's got the switcher built into it.
It's got 4 HDMI's.
Okay,
Yeah.
those things are awesome.
Oh, sorry, I'll let you start. Sorry.
No, I mean, I don't even know if we're live right now, to be honest. Like, I'm still trying to figure
knows?
out. Who knows, man? Like, who knows? All right, let me click live here and see.
Oh, and I was going to tweet it. I was going to tweet out too. Shoot.
Oh yeah, let's all pimp this thing out, man.
You should totally do that.
Get all the
hold up.
Pimp it.
Let's see. Wait, are we live or are we not live? Like, I can't even get the dashboard.
I'm sure someone will tell us.
Oh, they always do. Like, that's one thing the
Pretty
chat is
quickly.
really
Live.
good for.
Yeah,
Is they'll
we're
tell you what's
definitely
going
live.
on.
We're live and streaming, and I'm we're live tweeting again. This is
First thing you hear is the chips bag. Actually, what you heard was my pumpkin spice Cliff Bar.
much healthier, much healthier.
Fancy.
My version of healthy this morning was, instead of having the A&W egg sandwich and a hash brown, I just had 2 A&W sandwiches.
Oh, nice.
All right, I guess we are live, guys. Apparently, yeah, we're live. Things appear to be working. I mean, honestly, we're ahead of schedule because we're only like 5 minutes late.
Perfect.
It's so nice to know that I'm not the only one who spends most of the first part of their podcasts or whatever you call these things, trying to figure out the technical issues.
You know what's funny is it doesn't matter if it's YouTube or Twitch. It's the same thing. Even though I usually do about 4 or 5 streams a week over on Twitch, and I don't think I've ever started one where, like, in the 11th minute of the show, I'm like, come on, work, damn it, unplug and plugging stuff in. Like, every time, even today, I had to unplug and replug my webcam twice.
Well, I told you I had to steal my Bratlet's webcam because I glued mine to the ceiling, right? So
I love how we say we steal our kids' stuff, even though we're the ones that bought it for them.
Let's face it, it's more, we're basically have to steal everything back because everything that is ours, I mean,
It's true,
you haven't got into that yet.
They pick it up and show interest, and you just run with it. You're just like, oh my God, it's so exciting that they love what I have here. Oh, geez, I don't have one now.
Yeah, exactly.
All right,
I really want to support anything that they're interested in. Hey, give my freaking video capture card back.
One of my favorites was my little one. I call her the intern. I love that. We were sitting around the fire, and she's like, "Oh, it'd be really cool to have like lockpicks," and because she was like on this spy jam for a little while.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've always wanted my own lockpicks too, and so like. I'm like, when she's talking about it all excited and stuff, I'm ordering lockpicks from lockpicks.com with like a clear training lock.
Oh, the clear training lock? I know,
like,
I got to get that.
She's not going to know for like 3 or 5 days, and this is going to be the coolest thing.
Dude, I have a lock. I have a lock in the other room that I was playing with, trying to do it with just paper clips. But I realized I went to use a depth gauge the other day, and I was like, what the hell have I done? Like, it's all cut up and it's a wreck. And you know what it was? I'd taken this spark plug gap thing, and I'd cut it down to make it into a pick.
Oh, nice.
Because they're actually the perfect size for lock picking, right?
That's a great idea. I never even thought to use one of those. Plus, they're spring steel, so
they're spring steel, and they're also pretty cheap, right?
Oh yeah. You can actually you can get them in different widths too. So like different barrels and locks and stuff. You can use thinner ones or thicker ones. And
you just basically shave out the bit you don't want. You get a nice little curve on it, and you could actually create your own picks that way.
Yeah. Do you ever watch? There's a guy on YouTube called Lock Picking Lawyer. Do you watch that guy?
Lock Picking Lawyer. Oh yeah.
Oh my God. One thing, I don't know how he monetizes his channel because all of his videos are literally like 1.5 minutes long. He's like, look, I'm gonna pick this lock. Look, I picked the lock. That's all I got for you today. And I mean, it's like that's all of his videos.
But I could watch it for like hours. Like
I do.
Well, yeah, and I do. I could, but I'm very busy, Barnacules.
Oh, I keep forgetting you're so famous.
So
big
busy.
Famous man.
Yeah, you're always busy. That's how. No, I watch a lot I guy.
Actually, David, did you see what I posted on Twitter? I literally, instead of putting in like I always do and say that you're like the guy from Stargate Atlantis or whatever, I just said if you don't know who David Hewlett is, check IMDb.
Get on it. Sort it out yourself.
I'm like, you work for your sandwich, damn it. All right, let's see. Do I got the right? I'm still trying to figure out if I got everything set up right. So hold on, I got the control view up, guys. Just to humor. Everybody's pouring in right now. We just went from like 60 to 208 people, so they're like figuring it out. They're figuring it out.
Well, how many people do you normally get? Like, what's a What's a normal for you?
So our normal average that we have is about 600, 650.
Oh yeah.
And then our peak is usually about 700. So, and the lowest that we've had probably is like 450, 400, like when we're really off.
You're welcome anytime.
Bring them in, man.
I bring in the lower numbers.
It's like last week when Michael came in and just dropped like a massive amount of money. I was like, AuxxZillary's gonna be so mad. If AuxxZillary's watching, he's gonna be so mad. But I messaged him afterwards, said we're gonna split it anyways. So you basically did AuxXillary's work for him last week. So yeah. You lord that over his head forever.
I love it. I love it. This is for me. I enjoyed that. I was saying to Jane, she's like, well, I mean, do you need to be doing this every weekend? I was like, yes, I do. I was like, I feel like I need to. It's fun to talk about this stuff with people who understand it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. This is I've never treated my business like a business. Actually, that's my downfall, but it doesn't matter. I can't do it. My ADHD demands that anything that I do has to be a hobby. Otherwise, I just lose interest and go chase squirrels. So I treat this like a hobby, and it's fun because it's like every week I look forward to sitting down with AuxxZillary. He's a good buddy of mine, and we just get to talk shop for like 3 hours. How do you guys
know each other? Like, how did you guys hook up?
Well, it's a long story. There's leather chaps involved in a bar, but
there you go. Yep.
You want to tell them, Ox? Do you want to tell them the story?
So I still work for Puget Systems, the company that built the PC behind Barnacules there. He's
blocking it today.
I was hired in September.
Oh no, you're seeing this camera. I keep forgetting.
There you go. Oh right.
There you go.
And in December, the boss talks to the assembly group and says, "Hey, does anybody want to volunteer to build a sponsored PC? That we're doing for this YouTuber guy. He wants to live stream it on his YouTube channel." Right. I, being a big fan of Twitch and live and the burgeoning live stream industry, I was like, "Oh yeah, totally, sign me up." I'm maybe 2 months into working.
And remember, Josh from Fractal System is the one that brought me in originally to tour Puget Systems. I don't know if you knew that part, but that's how I found you guys. Was a guy that built the cases.
Is that right?
Right. Yeah, so that case right there, the manufacturer of that case is the employee for their company's marketing division is a friend of mine. So he messaged me up one day and he's like, "Hey, dude, I'm going to be in town. I'm going to tour this Puget Systems place. They build computers. Dude, you should come along." And so I didn't have nothing going on. So I'm like, I'm just going to go along. And I got to tour the whole facility and meet everybody. And John, I don't know if I met you that day, though.
No, that would have been like a year or two before I even started.
Before you, that's right. Okay, but that's how I actually found Puget Systems. Like, otherwise, I wouldn't have never have known they even existed. Because they were such a small little niche company, and I didn't really I wasn't in their field of influence, but that was the connection that was made. And then from there on out, it's like, great guys. John is a great guy. The CEO of Puget Systems, fantastic dude.
That's so funny. Like, how did you know how you'd get started on that? Because
most successful live stream we've had, though.
By the way, I think we peaked
at 7,000 viewers.
Yeah,
really.
We peaked at 7,000 live viewers, and we had over 25,000 unique.
So you don't have to wear the wife beater shirt and be Henry Cavill.
No, you don't, man. You just need. And the funny thing about it was, we went in straight. It was on Twitch, right? We didn't even do YouTube. I think it was Twitch.
It was YouTube.
And so, it was YouTube. Okay, so I went on YouTube, and I have my largest following on YouTube. But even when I stream on YouTube, like right now, it's like we might get 500 to 700 people in here eventually. But for some reason, because the title of the stream was literally what was it? Like, we're building. I forget, were we building a PC or were you just up? No, we were building it that day.
Oh,
that's right. We were building it because that was a long stream. And so the title of the stream was building $12,000 computer or something like that. And people just flooded in. I'd never even seen that kind of attendance on Twitch. And it just maintained it through the whole show. And we were just having a good time and goofing off. And I was making fun of you, getting everything wrong. But you were, but it was like you were, I don't know if it was just you were nervous because I think that was your first live stream, wasn't it?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I had done a couple in California before I moved up here, but nothing, significant.
Yeah, but he got into his groove, man. David, he after that, not even an hour into that stream, he was 100% on his game and he was dishing it as good as he was receiving it. And then, we knew that there was a chemistry there. And then I told John, I said, you guys should stream.
Yeah.
You should. Yeah. And then you ended up taking the reins on that and running with it. And you were Dr. Professor Beardosaur.
Man. That was hands down
it's the greatest name ever.
Yeah, after that, it was like I got the bug. It was well, you got to think too. You got to think too. I was a new kid at the work, and here I am, like, live in front of thousands of people representing the company and all this stuff. So at first, you don't know how sassy I can be with my brand new president of the company standing next to me with this YouTube celebrity.
Right.
And so it took a little bit to, like, okay, I can talk a little shit and it's okay.
You got to warm up to that stuff too, right?
That's the one thing I've been credited with anybody that I've ever worked with, like, on any capacity, is that, you know, I usually find my limits really quick. Like David, you probably even realize this, like, just for the little bit of time that we've known each other too. It's like, I'll test the waters and just be like, go on. I'll start just swearing and talking about shit that's, like, so far off in the toolies, just to gauge response. And then if the response is good, I'm like, okay, I move the bar a little higher, and I move the bar a little higher. But I do that really, really quick.
So I'm warned.
Most of the time it works good. Every once in a while, I'll like freak somebody out, and then they withdraw, and then I got to go, oh, my bad. Let's fix and start over. But more often than not, it's like, I just crank it up to 11 and see what happens. And turns out Houston can go up to like 45. So
I find it so hard now with the masks, because people just don't, like, I am like sarcasm, snarkasm, you know, the whole time. When you got a mask on, people can't tell you're joking, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, like, I'm sorry, I'm what? You know, a lot of that stuff. I've just given up talking, basically.
Do you see my awesome Batman masks? Look at this. A fan of mine sent these over. They're epic.
I have to watch the stream. I can't see.
You can't see them, can you? Oh, here, go into Skype. I'll look at the other camera. There you go. Look at that.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
I've got a Tech Bandits one somewhere, but I think it's upstairs.
No, they're freaking awesome. That's really nice when people do stuff like that. I was like, because they asked me, they made masks, and I was like, well, I'd love to have one of your masks. And they're like, what's your PO box? And sure enough,
I like the bandana.
Yeah, the bandana suits. Well, he has to, because there's no way that beard is going to fit under anything.
Oh, that's true.
Like, if you put a surgical mask on, all the air would just go up around it. Although, is that a HEPA filtration rated? Like, will that pull the bacteria and smoke out of the air if it comes through your beard?
No, it's just cloth.
You should do a test. I think that'd be funny to get an air quality meter and, like, put a mask on and, like, measure the air quality as it comes up through your beard and after it goes through your beard, and see if there's any appreciable change.
Yeah,
because even if it was like 10 parts per million, who cares, right? That'd still be cool. Like, I don't know of anybody else that's done a beard mask. And if you can prove that it's effective, even 1%, that would be epic.
You could put like if you could just even like just somehow sort of weave a filter into there, like, you know.
Dude, you just dip your beard. You dip your beard in like cornmeal and then activated charcool, and you're like, yeah, done.
That's it. I'm never gonna get this tweet sent. I know.
I was doing the same thing.
I can't
focus.
Dual screen like my son.
You must focus, David's son. You must focus.
I thought I had a cool image for TechTalk.
That was it. I was like, "Where's my?" I had a shot.
Hey guys, I'm hearing like an errant whistle off in the distance, like a wonky fan. Oh, is that you?
Me. There's a hairdryer.
Okay.
RTX isn't doing what it's supposed to.
Oh, thank God.
The ladies having to get ready.
I've been getting some weird stuff on this mic too, so I'm hoping it's not me. Please,
no, now that he mentioned it, it's definitely a hairdryer. Like, I didn't until he said it, I couldn't tell. It almost sounded like a coil whine from a graphics card or something like that. And I was like, what is this? But no, it's.
Did I fix it?
Yeah. Are you? Oh, you turned on RTX Voice, didn't you?
Yeah, I told Skype to use the RTX Voice.
Wow, that made all the difference in the world.
Wow.
Hey, David, have you used RTX Voice?
Wow. I'm still working on an old trash Mac, for God's sake.
Because they officially support the 10 series cards for RTX Voice now.
Yeah, I think that's funny that they like get on a conference call with me for like an hour to explain why they're dropping support for the 10 series and why that hack isn't going to work in the future. And then they come out like a couple of months later and they're like, yeah, we're just going to make it work on everything, guys. Like, Nvidia, like, come on. Like, I literally talked to him for like an hour trying to explain from a developer perspective that there was no good reason for them not to support it directly on the other cards. They're like, oh, no, but we're going to be using tensor cores and it's going to be so much more effective. And I'm like, but it works now and it works beautifully. Like, just release it.
Yeah, it's dumb. That's dumb.
So wait, they're not going to support it, or they are supporting it?
They are supporting it now.
They officially support it, yeah. The latest release of RTX Voice, it all works.
But they weren't going to originally.
No, because what they were trying to do is they were trying to create this was one of a series of, I think, 3 apps they told me. I don't know how much I'm supposed to be able to say. So I won't talk about that.
Okay. But so I'll say everything.
They've talked about there's the
background cutout,
studio.
Right?
Yep, they've talked about that already. The that's definitely RTX enabled. Like you have to have
that'll have to be, yeah, because that's like neural networks and stuff, right?
Yeah, and then the voice and I think they wrapped up the 2 other ones in under it's like GeForce Studio or something. So it's all related to live streaming.
Huh.
Dude, that
makes sense. Like, I mean, especially now. I mean, like, that's like everyone's. Oh my God! If I get another freaking invite to a podcast, hey, I've just started a podcast. You got to get on it. I'm like, oh my God! All right, already enough.
Isn't that what got you here? There's this thing
called the interweb. And you're like, really?
Hey, I want to thank a couple of people real quick. Paul Jones. Oh my God! Thank you for the 100 Australian dollars.
What?
He said, I know David's going to send his freaking agent after. Like, his agent's already like, money, I smell it. He's going to come for us, man. He's coming for us. But it's okay, David. If you keep bringing in the money, I'd be more than happy to do it. He said, freaking out my all-time favorite Stargate Atlantis actor, watching you now, season 4, but get a notification at the same time that you're on YouTube, and here you are, thanks. Dude, I had so many people message me that said that they just started watching Atlantis. One person was like, I didn't even know he was in a show. Like, they knew you from something completely different, like the movies or something. They're like, oh my God, he was in a show? I was like, yeah, dude, he's like main character in Atlantis. Atlantis, what's that? And now they're like all the way through it. Yeah, it's
oh my God, I can't imagine anyone not. That's like the only thing anyone ever talks to me about. I mean,
I don't get it.
I'm always surprised.
I'll figure out who it is. I'll figure out who it is and send them your way just so you can like see what it's like to hear from the perspective of somebody who didn't know you for what you actually did, like the most.
Right.
Because same thing happens to me. I'll go to conventions and stuff like that, and people will be like, "Oh my God, I saw that video where you put the hot tub together. That was so funny." And I'm like, I'm like, somebody doesn't know. I 3D print too. Well, at least I used to. And they're like, really? Oh my gosh, I haven't seen any of your 3D printing videos. I'm like, I got like 600 3D printing videos and one hot tub video.
It is weird. I guess it just depends on the bubble, right? Whatever your search bubble is in.
Yeah.
Now, why can't I? You know what? You have to send me the link on Skype so I can see what the heck's going on.
I will. Hey, Anthony, thank you for the 30 poundaroos. The real money. The real money. 30 pounds, man. 30 pounds. He said, let's get this started. Love Saturday nights. Seen no ice hockey in Belfast.
That's like one beer in London.
Oh, is London pretty expensive? Like, I've never been.
God, yeah. No, it's
like more expensive than like California, like LA and stuff.
I think Toronto's more expensive, honestly. I find Toronto more and more expensive. It seems like I feel like food is generally not that expensive in England, but things are. Like, I just find like just getting around, like life stuff, rent, heating and all that kind of stuff. Oops, I'm gonna stop. I don't want to play that.
It's a like, David, you got to close that before we start the stream, buddy.
Yeah, sorry guys. Yeah,
you're gonna get us copyright striked for 70s music.
No, apparently it's a new search tool that's basically psychic. Can I skip the ad now? There you go. Now I can skip the ad. There we go. Look at that sandwiched between you.
Hey, what's up, Michael Marshall? How's it going, buddy? Oh, hey, Renee's in here. Renee SDK. What's up, dude? Getting some people. SDK. Yeah, he's from my Twitch stream.
Oh, cool.
A lot of my Twitch streamers are finding their way over here. I wish that there was like a community feed on Twitch where I could post this, because like if I stream on Twitch every once in a while, I'll post that I'm streaming to my community feed on YouTube. It's basically like like Twitter on YouTube, and it'll bring some people over, but they don't have anything like that on Twitch. Like, do they not have?
Is there not a way to funnel it into all of them, and then doesn't StreamYard or something allow you to do that or something?
I know that there's a program I used to use I call it a program. It's a RESTful API on the web called IFTTT, if this then that. And it works really, really well for like doing like cross posting and stuff like that. Like, you can set up all these conditional things that'll say like, if you post something with a certain hashtag on Twitter, then copy that and post it to YouTube, and then post it to Twitter and post it to Facebook, and you can rig it all up. Like, I used to have it rigged up to do crazy stuff. Like, you can even have it like, if you go live, like live streaming, you can have like one of those Philips Hue lights like turn red out in your hallway, or turn green so that the people in your house know if you're streaming or not.
Oh, that's good.
Yep. So, I mean, there's so much to do there. You could make an entire YouTube channel out of just showing how to use IFTTT, because it's like its own.
I'm sure someone will.
Yeah, well, I probably should, because I'm gonna go broke if I don't. Hey, Kung's Fiskerens, thank you for the 20 sexes. We love getting the sexes here. Thank you so much for those. It's amazing. So,
thank you.
So actually, before we get into the main topic, since people are still pouring in, we're at about 416 and climbing. Let's talk about what AuxxZillary pinged me like right before we started the show, and he wanted to continue the talk about CRISPR. We were talking about CRISPR 2 weeks ago.
Oh yeah,
and AuxxZillary pointed out that there's actually a case that's been prosecuted with successful genetic engineering of 2 babies?
Yeah.
So why don't you lead
3 total?
Yeah, go ahead and lead us in on that and explain. I know that this happened. You said in 2018, right?
Yeah.
So lead in and tell us like where this went and like what the outcome was, because this is like unprecedented. We were talking about glowing mice, but this is like a whole different level.
Is this the Chinese doctor?
Yeah, it is.
It is. Yeah. So I'm probably gonna butcher this, but I'm gonna try my best. He Zhangqi. I know the first part I got right. Zhangqi. Is a scientist. He's the guy who announced in November of 2018 that he had successfully genetically modified human babies. I believe two of the babies are girl twins. They were born actually in October. He announced it in November that he had done it. And he's been prosecuted, and he's going to spend 3 years in jail for like medical ethics violations.
This has been ongoing for a while though, right? They just ruled against him, but he's been being sued for like a long time for this, right?
Yeah. And it's kind of weird because I feel like this is one of those things where they didn't really have a law for it outside of the ethics violations. Like you're not supposed to, but beyond that, there wasn't any real rules. He just kind of went outside the regular sort of normal ethics for medical people.
And didn't he tweak it so that they were less susceptible or to AIDS or something? There was a specific genetic thing that they'd done.
Yeah, I'm just skimming through the Wikipedia article. It was an HIV positive dad, an HIV negative mom.
Yep. Right. And the babies are completely resistant to HIV. Like even if they're directly exposed to the virus, they can't get it. Like they edited a piece of the DNA so that they can literally the RNA encoders or whatever on the AIDS virus can't enter the cells. So they're basically like they have shields up. Like they figured out how to, because you can't vaccinate against HIV because of how fast it changes, but you can change the genetic code so that entire class of virus just doesn't work. And apparently it was successful. Like they proved that these kids are like completely susceptible to AIDS, which is like, if that works, you could genetically engineer every baby on the planet and AIDS would just disappear in 2 generations.
So, well, sort of, I guess it goes on to say, so that's the gist of it. There's a particular gene that codes for a protein that HIV uses to enter the cells. There is a very specific mutation to that gene that a few people naturally have. In particular, they mentioned a Berlin patient. What he did, though, was rather than introducing the known mutation, for the folks at home, CRISPR is and I'm going to very, very like I'm 5 sort of thing. Just lowbrow. Is a way of literally cutting out a particular section of DNA and inserting a new one using some virus. It's something to do with viruses, and you can literally
the Cas9 virus or something. You can basically inject DNA, but you can do it in your garage. That's the thing I think that's most important everybody to know is you can literally do this shit in your garage. This is not like big biolab stuff. This is like extract.
The hard part's already been done.
Yeah, exactly.
The virus part is the key. The engine that makes it all work is already done.
Yeah,
but so instead of using this mutated gene that already exists, he introduced a frame shift mutation, which was intended to completely non-function that particular protein, the CCR5 protein. But it turns out
hopefully only that.
Right. Yeah. It goes on to say that there are forms of HIV that use a different receptor gene instead of CCR5. So the work that he did may not protect them from all forms of HIV, but this particular way of doing it, I guess, and it seems to have worked.
And it also alters the DNA of the chromosomes too. So if they reproduce, even with somebody who has HIV, the baby cannot get it. Like as long as it's that receptor. Like if it's a different receptor, you're still screwed. But basically, they can't pass it on to their children, even if their partner's infected. So it's pretty much a guarantee as long as it's in that class of HIV virus that the baby isn't going to get it. So it's like this seems like a wildly good thing.
Mutated humans.
Yeah, they are mutated humans though.
Yeah,
I mean, aren't we all?
Yeah, but the thing is, you can also
at a certain angle.
Yeah,
right.
That's true. That's true.
Because I bumped into this argument when I was buddies with some folks at the UW, in particular they were in the urban horticulture program, and we got into a talk about genetically modified organisms, right? GMO foods and things like that. And I brought up the argument: what is the difference between selective breeding and doing it in the lab, right? Like
longer.
We've been genetically modifying all sorts of organisms for a long time. Dogs, right? Yeah. It's through selective.
To be fair, though, look at the outcome. Look at the outcome. Every purebred dog on the planet has like severe medical issues.
Yeah,
that's and again though that's from bad breeding, bad reinforcement of small gene pools. There are good ways of doing things.
Okay, that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah. You can have stable genetic lines that you're not going to get weird faced bulldogs and stuff.
So I can make a super David Hewlett without him having like a third arm coming out of his left ear.
In a few generations, actually, it doesn't take long to introduce major changes in a bloodline. It only takes like three or so generations.
What do they call it? Gene drive? It's a gene drive they call it? Is that the term they use for something that's going to actually change the sort of ongoing population?
I'm not sure, but yeah.
Well, I know the people that do it are called biohackers, right? And I've heard the term gene drive, but I think what it is, like CRISPR and the Cas9 virus, which I think is the delivery mechanism for using CRISPR.
Right.
We've already mapped the human genome. Like I think we finished that project like 10 years ago or something like that. So we already know like what causes the color of your eyes. I mean, we don't know, we know every gene, but we don't know exactly what every gene does. But like, what's that?
Yeah. We've got the map, but we don't know what everything does.
Right. But we figured out like eye color. We figured out things like skin pigmentation and stuff. Like we found certain important ones. They can like change your physical appearance. So you could technically use CRISPR to go in there and mess with those. I don't think it's as easy as you just going in and saying, oh, I want green eyes. Let's just cut this out and put it in here. I think it's probably still going to be a percentage chance of it like taking hold.
Right.
I think in a way it's like CRISPR's almost the benefit of CRISPR is that we're now able to narrow down what those various different genes are. So we're basically at the point now where we're like going like, okay, it's like I always think of it like looking at when you're programming. It's like, let's cut and paste this bit and see what this does in my program. Yeah. Right?
You can do crazy stuff, though.
Yeah, like, that's what CRISPR allows you to do.
I'm curious, like, so this guy faced a huge amount of backlash for this.
Yeah.
And I can see why.
Sort of, I guess. I'm reading through some of the statements made from, like, the scientific community and stuff. It seems that most people are really upset that he didn't follow the ethical norms in the absence of full scientific evaluation. Like, but the thing is, if he had asked permission, nobody would have allowed this.
Yeah, it's just like in the United States, you're not allowed to do any cloning here, but they do it in Sweden like all the time.
Because like I think it's because like we're afraid of what could happen.
Yeah.
And there is, I understand that argument where like, okay, what about the long-term effects for these kids? You know, maybe what he did is going to have them cause out, something that we don't know. But like, how are we supposed to find out? And it's not
the problem is
if he introduces
something. If he introduces something that then goes on to become like a cataclysmic problem in the genetic makeup of mankind or humankind, that's I guess what everyone's terrified of.
Actually,
I think you got to break the rules to make them.
David, you made a really great point there, and that is if it's an animal, and I know this sounds really, really this sounds bad, but in an animal situation, if you say manipulate a monkey or something like that, and it ends up developing like the rabies virus genetically or something, you can terminate that animal. You can't really do that with a human after they've been born without people thinking that you're just a murderer and a monster. So if you create a genetic abnormality that is like horrible, like you literally create a human that has a super bug that they pass on to everybody and there's no way to inoculate them against it. It's like, what do you do in that situation? You can't terminate them.
I feel like there's kind of a misunderstanding there. I don't think editing it would be it would be more along the lines of not so much of like, oh, they edited these kids' genes and now they have created some sort of disease outside of something that would be passed along in the bloodline. It's not that these kids are going to grow up, cough on someone, and now the world is going to end because of some genetically modified thing.
Right.
It's more like, what are their kids going to present later? Are they going to have some sort of cancer growth in their brain or some sort of thing that doesn't quite make sense after the fact? Like, they might turn out to be perfectly healthy, but then they go on to have kids, and now these edited genes are trying to mix with non-edited genes, and how is that going to affect the future bloodline?
And that anyone can
it's not contagious.
Yeah. Well, no, but the thing is, like, you're kind of talking about like a recessive gene. Let's say they mess with a bunch of DNA. Sure. It doesn't really affect the person that's doing it, but then their offspring later on, they find out has these weird traits, and then maybe that continues down that bloodline over time. But the scary thing, I think, from an ethical perspective, and I'm playing devil's advocate because I love CRISPR and I hope that it's solved. Because
me too.
It's literally the solution to everything.
Negative here. Yeah.
Like, it's literally the programming language to us, the computer. So like, if you want to get rid of the virus, it's like McAfee for your, okay, oh, you don't even need a vaccination. We're going to go ahead and literally just put in a piece of DNA that makes it so you're just susceptible to that entire type of virus, like, period. Like, even future viruses that come out that are coronaviruses, you could just make yourself DNA resilient to it if you know what genes do what inside of the body, which is what we're still, we've mapped them. Now we can figure out what they do. But I think where this becomes like unethical is when you have people that are doing the designer baby thing. And I think that's the thing that most people are afraid of, is like, let's make a kid that has blonde hair and blue eyes and above average strength. Let's go ahead and give them that little DNA snippet from the giant, kangaroo that's like ripped like Arnold Schwarzenegger, so that their kids and all their kids are just massively ripped, because that kangaroo died of old age. Like, there was no adverse effects to that kangaroo literally being able to like shred a phone book. And it happens to dogs too. This is a gene, like every animal, this happens in like 1 in a million. They get this recessive gene that makes their muscles big. And there's a guy working on that. In the documentary I watched, the guy in his shed is injecting himself, trying to give himself that piece of code that makes him just get shredded. And the weird thing is, it's not working.
Is working on the dogs.
Yeah, but if it doesn't work on him, what happens if like later down the road he has another kid and the kid pops out and they're like, the kid is just ripped by like 4. And he's like, I'll take over the world,
But like, and see, and then I understand where like that sort of concern happens, because like, again, like with these babies, this edited gene might present, now they can't process protein appropriately or something, or like what happens when they hit puberty, because that's a major change to a person's self and like their whole makeup and how they work. And so like, we don't know, and it could end up being terrible, but like there's a weird sort of,
the good outweighs the evil, in my opinion.
Yeah, in a way. And it's not, again, I feel like it's not like he did this without, like, secretly from the parents. Like, they knew what they were getting into. And I have to assume that the guy
even funded some of it.
Presented the case and like the possibilities to these people, the good and the bad. And so from a high level, like, medical science view, maybe what he did was bad in their sense, but like, who would have, how do you set that up in a way that would be acceptable to the medical community in general?
It's probably happening already. It's just the first time that we're publicly doing. You don't think like America or Russia or China is already doing this stuff like for military purposes? I mean,
and even the cloning thing back when Dolly the sheep, right? You know for sure they were trying this stuff out behind the scenes in some dark lab somewhere where nobody was talking about it for at least 5 years.
How many attempts does it take?
We got it right.
Yeah.
How many dead sheep? How many weird fucking cancerous monsters did they create before they came out and said, "Hey, look, we got it right this time"?
That was a Cronenberg fest, like before you got Dolly.
And so like people in the chat are like, it's an issue of morality. We got to talk about eugenic wars and things like that. And I keep thinking about Gattaca, right? Where like
it's an interesting film.
It's an accepted thing. It's almost just as a matter of course that you're going to edit your baby so that they don't have astigmatism, or they're as smart as they can be, that they're not going to have asthma or whatever. And
your parents have designed you to be who you're going to be.
Yeah, the best that you can be, and then that leaves the normal people like left behind. And
Well, that divide, right? The divide.
Yeah, your resume.
Oh, sure. Money.
You're not gonna have a race box on your resume anymore. It's gonna be like the gene sequences. Like, do you have R73? Do you have 482? Do you have the skin pigmentation? Do you have the
yeah. If they don't know that already.
They'll just take a blood drop and say, "Yep, you've got the right markers. You don't have the right markers." That'd be your job interview.
I think it's mostly religious fear, though. If I'm honest, like looking, like even watching the documentary, I felt like most of it is religious fear because you have these religious groups that are like, listen, this is playing God at this point, because if you can edit the genome, then that proves that you understand like God, like you are being God at that point. And that's supposed to be like an impossibility. So some people are like,
we're doing that anyway.
Yeah, we are, right?
What about arranged marriages where you go like, I want my daughter to have babies with that guy? Like that's literally picking and choosing this stuff anyways.
You're right.
It just takes longer and it's
totally
more
right.
awkward.
That's what I mean about like selective breeding. It's like, oh man, like that's how we got to where we are now. Like if you look at just in the span of a couple hundred years, look at a house built in 1905 is tiny. That's because they were small back then. That's because their diet was terrible. That's because their medical practices were terrible. And like now, through diet and medical science and things like that, and genes, like we have bred to be bigger, stronger, like handsomer.
Well, and we used to have like 50 babies because half of them would die.
And CRISPR isn't going to make that change overnight, right? I mean, it's the babies that are benefiting from most of this gene splicing because you can't get it to proliferate fast enough in like an adult human, at least yet, right? Like you can't just go, inject this thing and it just goes over and takes over your whole system and you turn into like the Incredible Hulk and rip out your pants. I mean, it takes a long time.
But I would totally do that.
I do wonder though, if
I got the mass.
They have been doing this at like the beginning stages, right? Embryo stage. But if it is a virus, it would take longer, I think, in a fully formed, person, like you're ready to go and done. But over time, if you were to consistently expose yourself to the appropriately designed virus, you could, I would imagine, over a certain amount of time, have blue eyes now. Because what is it, like every few years you're basically a new person anyway, right? Your skin cells and everything regenerate.
Well, all you have to do is just like you basically have to follow in the footsteps of cancer. You have to create a virus that is not so extreme that your body attacks it, so that it can keep proliferating and taking over cells and reproducing itself until there's more cells in your body with the virus than without it. And then ultimately the virus will work its way into everything, because all your cells die and have to regenerate. Some regenerate at different rates though. Like I think your retina doesn't regenerate. Like the cells that you're born with in your retina stay the same throughout your entire life.
I feel like your eyes are the same size from the moment you're born type thing or something.
Same with brain tissue. Like certain brain tissue does not regenerate. It's really weird. But there's no reason why it couldn't, which is what makes CRISPR really amazing, is because there's literally a piece of code in the DNA that tells it not to replicate. Like it's actually a built-in, I don't know why, but evolution decided that for some reason we need different things in our body to age and deteriorate at different rates. And
well, and it's a budding thing, right? The cells can only replicate a certain number of times before there's more scar tissue than there is like budding tissue. That makes sense.
And that's how you get like cancer and stuff.
Yeah, and they said that literally a cell, you can have flawless regeneration of a cell. You can have cellular mitosis where both cells are as strong and exact replicas of the original cell, but there's DNA in there specifically to like degrade how much cellular mitosis happens, so it slows down over time, and it happens less and less and less. So you get old, your skin starts getting a little messed up, your eyesight starts going, your brain capacity starts to drop back a little bit because a lot of the neurons and stuff that aren't firing anymore and the cells behind that aren't regenerating. So it's like we have a built-in doomsday clock. And then we've looked at the immortal jellyfish, which is one of like 7 animals we've found now that could live forever. There's no reason why they couldn't live forever. And what happens, they get to that old age where their cells stop reproducing, and they basically just go back and take a copy of their original DNA from when they started and lay it over, and then they literally just die and reborn. They're reborn as a baby themselves. Like they don't have to reproduce. So as long as nothing eats them or no poison or something kills them, they will literally live forever. So it's crazy.
Well,
so we've been trying to figure out why that is.
Yeah. Is aging a genetic thing that we can cure? Is there like some settings in our DNA that could just say, you know what?
Yeah.
Don't stop. Let's keep going.
And science says that's possible.
I went to Biohack the Planet last year, which is amazing. It's like if you want to have you want to really see the bleeding, pardon the pun, edge of this kind of stuff, go to Biohack the Planet. It's run by a company called the Odin, who sells biohacking kits and tutorials and all this kind of stuff. Sorry, this is not an ad.
They're like $100 too, right? No. So it's like, this isn't crazy money to become make your cats glow in the dark.
I have a couple of kits. I took Biohacking 101, and I've got to do it again because I didn't understand any of it because I'm slow that way. But it's just, his big thing is like, guys, this is a tool that anyone can use, and we can pretend that it doesn't exist and that it belongs in big labs, or we can understand it. And like, I really want my tech bandits to understand this stuff because I feel like this is the same. We're going to have biotech kits in the same way that we had the 301 electronics kits, and I think that's important because if there's too much religion and sort of like governmental concerns with this stuff, they're going to lose out on a technology that other countries are going to run with it. So, we have to figure out what this stuff can do and how it can be used. A great example, actually, one of the guys that came up at Biohack the Planet came up and said, like, we found the most expensive genetic what's it called? Genetically engineered. I can't remember what the term was he used. Basically, a genetically modified medication, like a way of treating a disease using genetic engineering. Yeah. They found it. It's $1 million a treatment. Oh, yeah. The most expensive one they can get. They found it. They figured out how to do it for $700 in a freaking garage in Louisiana. And will probably go to jail for patent infringement. But the reality is that's what's available to people now.
Well, David, we were talking about insulin, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So, go ahead, AuxxZillary. Sorry, man. Just so you guys know, there is a little bit of a delay going on because of the internet. So if we talk over each other, it's not intentional. It's just that delay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No. Don't be sorry. This happens. Like, and people think that we're being rude to each other, but it's like, just realize that there's probably about a quarter-second delay, and that is enough to throw us off cadence sometimes. So just roll with it. We love David.
Just the interesting part about the dimension of patent infringement or copyright infringement. They already do that with genetically modified, like corn. Like if your natural corn blows pollen into the GMO cornfield of another farmer, or vice versa, like if the GMO corn gets into your natural corn, you could Monsanto can sue you for copyright infringement.
No way,
stealing
really?
Their corn. Yeah,
that's fucked.
And because they own the rights to those seeds, they own the rights to the genetic makeup of the.
I don't think people should be able to own corn. Like that's a slippery slope, right? It's like if you can own, that's like colors. I've never understood how you can own a color. Like Ferrari literally owns Ferrari red, and if you paint your car this specific shade and somebody puts a spectral analyzer up to it and it says that it's within a certain tolerance of that color, Ferrari can literally sue you. And I think that's the dumbest thing ever, because it's like our eyes can see an entire spectrum. If you let everybody copyright every single color, then nature is infringing on it. You can't paint your house. You can't own clothes. You literally, everything that you have would have to be like licensed. And I think that they didn't really look that far ahead when they were like, let's just let everybody get a copyright on everything or a trademark on everything. And
well, again, that's the problem, isn't it? Is that we leap ahead with these things, and we don't look at what could happen. And I guess that's the issue with the genetic engineering, that we need to sort of at least consider where are our what hills will we die on here? Like which ones are we going to stop at?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. The future. That's what scares me more than anything, though. And that's where CRISPR kind of breaks the rules a little bit, because just like with the insulin project, they reverse engineered and figured out like what genes in the body create insulin. Like the cells in your pancreas that create insulin. They figured out how to like make that work in like a fish tank using the power of the sun. Just basically like use it like we were talking about this a little bit, where they're using the sunlight and everything, and basically you have an aquarium tank that's making insulin. And once they figure out how to extract that insulin in its pure form and be able to like make it something that's injectable and safe, they can literally just give it away for free. The idea, basically, buy this kit. The kit isn't for making insulin. The kit is literally the toolbox. Like, I'm going to sell you the tools. I'm going to sell you the thing. You can use your own DNA, because we don't have to give that to you. Just go pop out your pancreas DNA or whatever, or somebody else, one of your family members. Doesn't really matter. Insulin's like works for everybody. There's no rejection of it. It's a very simple thing. So you get that, and then you make your own insulin at home, and it's like nobody can sue you for breaking a copyright or a patent, because you're making it yourself, and you're using like a GPL open source basically method of doing it. So as long as you're not distributing it and you're not selling it, there's really nothing that they can do to you, because you're literally manufacturing something that your body already makes, and you're doing it yourself. Whereas if somebody else did it, then they could sue them for the method, right? Like if they created a whole new method of creating it, that would be different. But let's say that one of the 3 manufacturers of insulin is already using genetics basically to create their insulin. I don't know if they are or not. I think honestly we're still like using some really arcane methods to create insulin. But
can you patent CRISPR?
See, oh God, I don't think you can, because I think CRISPR from the outset was literally given to the public. Like CRISPR, don't quote me on this, but I believe CRISPR and Cas9 virus are both public domain. Like anybody can use it. So you can build the kits.
Terrifying.
But, oh God, actually I got to look that up, because that if CRISPR could be patented, then you run into the problem that we have with every other technology on Earth, and that is a company like Apple or something like that ultimately gets a hold of it, and they either incredibly limit the scope of it and don't license it to anybody, or they do like Microsoft does and literally just sit on it and do nothing and own the patent just for the purpose of suppressing it so that they can continue to create, like, what if a pharmaceutical company got a hold of CRISPR? They would sit on it and prevent anybody from using it to create a cure so that they could still sell their medicine.
Well, and in a way, they've done that, right?
Yeah,
so this, God, I wish I can't remember the term that they used for it, but the idea that you can genetically engineer, stem cells or whatever to help cure a disease, in some of these incredibly debilitating diseases.
Yeah.
But if there's not enough people with it, it's not financially viable for these companies to pursue it. So, but they can still patent it. And it means they can still own it, which means they can charge even more for it. That's why, like, some of these treatments are millions and millions of dollars a year worth of treatments for something that can literally be cooked up in a kitchen in, in Louisiana or whatever it is. It was kind of shocking to me to hear that was even happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that series you were talking about, what was the series? It was great. It was great. It went into a bunch of this stuff on Netflix.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the show, but yeah, it's literally the whole thing is CRISPR. They don't. The title doesn't contain the word CRISPRs, but it's like genetic engineering is real or something like that. Let me see here.
All of those people were at Biohack the Planet. All of them. Josiah, who runs the Odin, who used to work for NASA, got bored of all the rules and regulations.
Yeah, it's called. I think it's called unethical. Let me see. Stand by. Unnatural selection.
That's it.
Yeah,
yes.
so I recommend you guys go watch that. That's where I first learned about CRISPR. Actually, probably a lot of us probably learned CRISPR from that frickin' series. But they basically follow several biohackers that are creating things. Like one guy's doing the insulin, another person I think is trying to find like a cure for cancer or something like that. And then they get one aspect of the show is they get somebody to volunteer to inject himself with this gene that's supposed to cure him of a disease that he has that'll ultimately kill him. So I can't remember what it is. Like if
including
it's Huntington's
AIDS as well. Wasn't an AIDS patient who was taking?
It was either AIDS or Huntington's or something, but it was something that shortened your life severely. And so this guy agreed to do it, but in order for him to be in the documentary, he had to inject the stuff himself. He couldn't have somebody else do it. So what they did is the biohacker created the serum, gave it to him, and then he was the one that had to inject himself on camera to prove that he was doing it of his own volition. He wasn't being paid for it, and he had to say a bunch of stuff on camera to make it legal. But as long as he was the one that was actually injecting it himself, there was no problems legally. At that moment. And he actually gets like really nervous about it, and you start to see that the company has a lot riding on this, so they start pressuring him to take it, and you start to realize like where this can actually go dark really quick, because as soon as a company is on the line and money is involved, then the ethics start to go out the window a little bit.
The guy running that company killed himself.
He did, actually. Shortly after, I think it was like within a year of the series, he committed suicide. And they said that he had already had previous failures, and that caused him a lot of pain and suffering. He was, and they did figure out how to do the insulin.
About that.
Yeah. He killed himself like within a year of the series. And I think it's because, and the sad thing is unfortunately, I think it had a lot to do with the actual documentary. Because when the documentary came out, it shined a huge flashlight on him, and people were like freaking out because like here's this dude that's literally genetically engineering insulin, and
they're all entrepreneur startup guys, right? So they're all like little Elon Musk wannabes, right?
Exactly, and they're like in a room. Like you look at the room, it doesn't look like a really clean biolab. It's like literally like a storage unit that has shelves of aquariums with like stuff going on, and the dude's like, has a syringe full of solution. He's like, oh yeah, this is gonna be it. This is gonna be like the next wave of curing this disease. And, you know, the other thing that was a little weird is I remember he kind of came off a little bit like a used car salesman. Like, you could tell that
it was weird, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was like, oh my God, man, this can change the world. It's going to fix everything, man. It's going to be the greatest thing ever. Like, there's nothing better than this. And the government can't stop us, and they can't do that, and we're bringing the power to the people. And you're like, okay, wait a second, this sounds... And then he starts pressuring the dude to take it because he has, like, second thoughts. He wanted to do it, and then as it got closer, he got nervous, and he's like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do this because if something goes wrong, I can't undo it. Like, if I take this and it causes, like, some weird thing. Because they said there's a possibility, right? They don't know until they try it. And so he started getting like cold feet, and he's like, dude, I don't want to pressure you because, you know, I can't do that legally, but we have all of our money riding on you. And if you don't take this, it's going to destroy the company, and nobody's ever going to get a cure for this, and everybody's going to die, but it's on you. You get to make the decision. But if you don't do it, we're all going to starve to death and die, and you're going to kill this child over here, Mary Sue. You know, it's just, they laid it on really, really thick until he actually did it. And the documentary didn't show, I believe he took it, but there was nothing in the documentary definitive about whether it cured him or there was any tangible change or anything, which is common. A lot of these guys that do these biohacks, there's no result. Like, for every 1,000 tries, there might be like one little inkling of something that happens. And usually it's not exactly what they intended. Like the glowing rats. Guys. Yeah. The glowing rats.
The glowing rats.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And it took him a long time to do that. Like the dude, and he's trying to get his dogs to glow now. Like, as of the documentary.
He's an absolutely lovely guy. He's cool. I've talked to him a couple times. In fact, I was supposed to chat with him a while back, and just as always, COVID. But his original thing, he breeds dogs, and he was finding that there's some disease that Dalmatians have because of the genetic engineering that's happened. Well, the selective breeding that's happened up until now. They have these horrible diseases. They die of these like horrible, painful diseases. And so, or genetic issues. And so he's looking to engineer a cure. The problem is the Dalmatian breeders, society say, well, then they're not Dalmatians anymore because they're genetically different than the purebred line of Dalmatians that we have existing now.
Yeah, you kind of redefine what purebred means at that point.
What does that mean? Exactly.
Yeah, which is funny because purebred is like not really purebred. Like, that's always been like a really backwards term, right? It's like the royal families that used to maintain the bloodline by like sleeping with their cousins. It's like they get like big prominent jaws. Their tongues would be so big they couldn't talk, and that was like considered fashionable. Like, that was like the trademark of the family. They're like, I think Family Guy made fun of them for having like the big jaw. They had like this huge prominent jaw that like messed up their jawline, so they couldn't like really eat well. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't speak well. Yeah, it's just, and it's crazy. But back then it was like, oh man, that's different. So that's like, if you see that person, you can look at them and know that they're a part of the royal family because nobody else has that.
Well, so imagine if they discovered that back then. Imagine if they were doing this, imagine what Hitler would have done with this, given in fact, he was probably working on this, his own version of this stuff anyway.
Sure,
right? They must have.
And
at least from the again, that selective breeding sort of angle, like he was filtering out blonde, blue-eyed, Aryan, trying in order to form like a group of people that would then reinforce those traits. So like he was kind of already on that.
Based on the whole eugenics thing, where the idea that there are lives not worth living, right? That they're like, oh, wait a second, you've got a terrible disease. We should not be reproducing with you. I mean, I think it's absolutely terrifying if there is a governmental or I guess any kind of institution deciding what is the ideal human. If you're then able to program that, then there's a lot of countries with people of color who are trying to be white because of all of the systemic sort of white settler rule type stuff.
Sure.
I mean, are we going to like genetically remove certain looks to people out of our out of the human breed?
Yeah. Oh,
I wouldn't make the cut. I know that.
I mean, it's I don't know. I feel like it does open the door for a lot of questionable acts, but I feel like this is one of those things where like if done appropriately, if done in a way that people fully understand the possible repercussions and that they're looked after, like these kids, I hope somebody's watching out and they have like lifetime medical service, so to keep an eye on them to make sure that nothing terrible happens. But like
But they're guinea pigs, right? They're for the rest of their lives. They're going to be guinea pigs.
Yeah, and that's like, I get the moral argument of like, oh, these kids' lives are now like almost ruined because they're these guinea pigs that are going to be these constant like eyeballs on them to like, whoa. But like, I don't know. I feel like we as a species have encountered other things in our progress that had a similar question where we did have to kind of take half a step back and kind of watch really carefully. Like the guys who invented the atomic bomb, they knew what they were doing when it was still on paper.
Oh yeah.
When they weren't even sure that it could be done, the physics told them that they were doing something that would have like enormous energy potential, and that energy is going to be released in a literally explosive way. They knew. They
literally thought it could set the atmosphere on fire, and they still did it.
And so, like,
yeah, remember the day the Earth caught fire? Remember that?
Yeah,
they had to drive around in submarines.
Yeah. And so does that mean like we shouldn't try? Like, did like, yes, it is a risk. It is we could be doing something very terrible, but like at the same time, it could lead to tremendous positives.
Well, and how do you unlearn that?
Yeah,
you can't put it back in the bottle, right? What's the saying? You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Hey guys, I found something on CRISPR's patent battle, by the way. I wanted to say this before I lose it. And the irony is,
fighting it?
It was literally just published yesterday. So it's funny we're talking about this today because I literally just found a scientific paper on this. CRISPR actually is caught in a patent battle right now, but it's not for CRISPR itself. It's for the application of CRISPR, and there's already companies and pharmaceutical companies patenting the use of CRISPR for specific things. So even though CRISPR itself is publicly available, arguably they're in court right now arguing. It hasn't gone one way or the other, but they're arguing that if, say, GlaxoSmithKline or Pfizer makes a gene using CRISPR that cures something, that nobody else can do that because that would be violating their space. So you're allowed to use CRISPR, but you're not allowed. It's the equivalent of you being able to write C#, but you can't use somebody else's code to write a piece of code that does the same thing. Mm-hmm. So just like patenting the colors, this has the same end result. If Pfizer pumps all their money into every single thing, like vague stuff, like using it to cure cancer, altering this specific genome, we're screwed. Like then it's back into the ballpark where it's like, even if you do it yourself, they could technically come after you. So and that sucks, because that's like, you should not be able to patent. That's one thing I think we need to pass some legislature on, is you should not be able to patent the modification, like the modification of your own genome in your own body.
But how do you enforce that? I mean, how the hell do you enforce that?
Yeah. In the same, to tag off the software development angle, like if I instead of copy pasting, if I come up with the same solution, like software is a tool, right? Like if I build a table the same way that you build a table, am I taking on your intellectual property? If I write software that accomplishes the same thing, and it turns out that I use basically the same solution in the code, does that mean I stole from you, or did I just come up with the same solution? There's always so many ways to solve a problem. And so like,
and now poor man patents don't work anymore. Remember, you used to be able to just send yourself a sealed letter through registered mail, and the U.S. Postal Service, if you ever got sued, you could just go into court and just show it's sealed, open it in court, and be like, look, I came up with this idea on this date, and that's before they got their patent. And now apparently that doesn't like work anymore. Like the courts are like, meh, if you don't have like a real patent, screw off.
Well, and the patent trolls are just gonna flood it, right? You just go like, oh, it's a gene treatment for whatever.
Yeah, where's that one about the square phone? I came up with a phone that was rectangular. Like, where is that? I'm gonna go sue Samsung and Apple. Samsung did that. Samsung literally patented a rectangular device with a touch screen, and it was that vague. And the patent office was like, "Sure, you can have it." Like, and then Apple got the same patent.
A bunch that way too. Yeah, Apple has bunches that are super vague that way.
They were locked in a lawsuit over that patent. Yeah, so it's mutually assured destruction at that point when you have just two big companies endlessly attacking each other, and then it turns into whichever company has the most money that can tie up the other company for the longest in court ultimately wins. So it's like justice doesn't even exist.
Well, and they just got this debate over software too, right? I mean, remember Bill Gates freaking out about how software is not free. it's got to be, it's got to be packaged and it's got to be owned by the companies that make it. And there used to be, the old school computer hackers, the old school, computer techs were like, no, man, you share it. It's just supposed to be out there,
It's like the old PSA. What was it? You wouldn't steal a car. And I always laughed when I saw that because you wouldn't steal a car, would you? And it's like, yeah, but I'd copy the shit out of one. Like if I saw one was cool and I had the ability to build it in my garage, sure.
I love those commercials. You wouldn't download a car, and I'm like, here I am on Thingiverse doing exactly that.
Exactly that. Yeah.
Your 3D printers are like.
I know a guy who 3D printed himself an F1 car.
Oh my god! Yeah. Yep, Joel.
He lives about 30 minutes from me.
It's like you wouldn't 3D print Lego, would you? Well,
yes,
I did.
There you go. Yeah. But that's it. I mean, at some point, how do you possibly enforce that patent? Like, there's no way to, and if you're doing it, I guess everyone's big, like the big sort of like, the we're saving lives approach is what happens if they genetically create? What if a terrorist in their garage genetically engineers something horrific that could wipe out the population? Yeah. And it's like, what if? Yeah. Because that's there's nothing stopping them.
Well, yeah, what if a bad actor gets enough nuclear junk in a box and sends it to, Wrigley Field?
Yeah.
What if,
I mean, you could just go run around collecting smoke detectors, break them open, and then just, atomize them over a city, and there you go. It's a dirty bomb. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, there's so many.
Oh, not radium. What is the? Actually, I think they used to use radium back in the day, but now, the radioactive phosphorescent. What's that stuff called? The
Boy Scout nuclear power thing.
It's like what they use for like the sights on some weapons now. They're the glow in the dark sights. Tritium. So tritium is a mildly radioactive material that glows. It has like a half-life of like hundreds of years, I think. And they make things that need to glow in the dark, like exit signs. If you've ever seen the green glowing exit signs that don't require any power to build, that's tritium. And apparently, it's not that expensive. Like, it's not as radioactive though. So it's not like you're going to build a breeder reactor out of like tritium sites. But somebody did that. Some dude, I think wasn't it in the UK? The kid that built the breeder reactor out of like a bunch of old like 60s clocks and stuff. He was like scraping the radium off.
Michigan.
Was that in Michigan?
No.
Oh my god! Of course, it's in America.
Yeah.
Of course.
Oh my god, that's terrifying.
Because it turns out that radioactive materials, like people think like building a bomb is hard, because to build a bomb, you have to basically have like this really, really accurate shape charge that compresses a mass flawlessly. If there's any weakness in it whatsoever, it fails. Like, it has to be flawless. And it turns out that's the hardest part about making a bomb. But to make a breeder reactor, all you have to do is take a whole bunch of radioactive material and put some kind of a neutron reflector around it, like bricks, and as long as you get the neutrons to reflect back in the mass is big enough, it will just breed and get hotter and hotter and hotter and just run away. So you can literally, you don't even have to kickstart it. You don't have to, like, modern nuclear reactors, it takes about, 300 watts or something like that. They have to basically use to kick off the process. Like, they have to generate the electrons to start the storm. And literally it's like like lighting a fire. You have to do the step to start the reaction. But it's like with a breeder reactor, it's like, no, you just put a bunch of radioactive material in proximity in a tight space and it just does it. Like, it's really, really weird. But yeah, this kid, he created a reactor that, like, I mean, they had to call in like special government agencies to like dismantle the reactor and evacuate the town. It was crazy.
It was actually, it got radioactive enough that it set off alarms. Like they have, they're monitoring stuff. They monitor stuff like that all the time. But yeah, it got to. It says here, well, he never actually managed to build a reactor. What he built was a neutron source. His goal was to make a breeder reactor, but
he didn't succeed in. Okay, so he was basically just creating like a neutron storm.
The source, but it was like radioactive enough that the local like EPA got a ding and they had to come clean it up. It was actually pretty bad.
It was literally in a shed. I saw a picture of it. It was a shed with a bunch of cinder blocks and aluminum foil,
which is super cool. Like, that's how easy it is to do this stuff. Like, the knowledge is out there. Like, you could do some pretty crazy stuff out there. And so like those big what ifs, it's like, well, then we'll have to react and do the best we can to fix it,
And now
it's like trying to regulate the drones. That's the other thing. I was thinking that everyone's like freaking out about the drones. It's like, just like what? So in other words, the only people who are like, so you think someone can't build their own little drone and fly it off without the serial numbers?
So, dude, I can already see in your bathroom window with my 100x Tasco telescope pointing out my second story window. You're worried about my drone hovering over your house at 200 feet? Like, calm down.
No, but even like as a weapon though, as a weapon, those drones as a weapon, as a payload for whatever it is you want to deliver. I mean, there's that
happened. Didn't they? There was a country not too long ago where the leader almost got assassinated by a drone that literally had C4 on it. They missed him, but they flew it in and just detonated it. And people are like, "Oh my god, what the hell!" Like this thing just blows up in the sky, and it was like a DJI Phantom. It wasn't even like a big drone or anything.
Yeah, that's it.
Isn't that wild? Like,
I feel like there's only so much legislation you can do. Then you got to start basically using technology against technology. I know that gets into. Then you get into. I guess you can get into an arms war, but at the same time, I feel like we need to understand like the DNA stuff. We need to understand CRISPR. We need to know what it can do in order to know how we can undo some of the problems that it could cause. Yeah. But if we just pretend, if we just pretend like, oh no, that's only bad people use CRISPR.
That's an outrageous take too. It's like only bad people, because like there's already been work done to do so much good.
Yeah, they're always going to be evil. Like you just have to accept it.
Like, the risk is worth it.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's going to make, and if you take it to a certain conclusion, like, you know what, we might end up with different kinds of humans.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We also can defend that. That's the thing, is anytime you create a technology that can be inherently dangerous, we'll just say everything's dangerous, right? The guy that invented peanut butter didn't know he was going to kill a bunch of people that had an allergy. There's always something evil that you can do with technology. But the thing is there's an arms race in every single one of those categories. So anytime that you create something that's amazing with technology, there's always something created to counter it, right? So they create nuclear bombs. So we create, Pegasus missiles and stuff like that can shoot them down, and the Sea-Whiz cannon or whatever that can like take out a ballistic missile.
And more sensitive detectors.
Exactly, more sensitive detectors. And then you have like the drone problem. You're like, okay, now drones are a real threat. So the White House literally has like a way to broadcast and take out the entire 2.4 and 5 gigahertz range for city blocks, so that any drone that was inbound or coming at them, they would immediately kill the communication from it and force it to land. Like it would, you couldn't pilot it anywhere in the proximity. And if it's still inbound, you got people that know it's coming and literally shoot it down out of the air. Like there's so many things, like EMPs. We got portable EMPs now where you can literally stop a car. I've seen that, like a car coming at you with even with an electronic ignition. You just pop this thing, car, boom, the whole thing shuts down, sputter, pulls over the side of the road. And I'm
How
like,
cool is that?
Yeah, right. And then you got Teslas. So the next iteration is now everybody's driving smart cars. They have like OBD3 or whatever. And now from a satellite, they can just send a signal down to the car and just shut off the ignition, and even have the car pull itself over and put on the brakes and lock the occupant in the car. So if the police are in pursuit of somebody, they're just like, oh, we're following license plate number blah. They get the VIN number. They send down a signal. It locks the doors, rolls up the windows, and safely pulls the car over on the median and kills it and waits for the cops.
And with Neuralink in your head, they'd know you were about to commit a crime you haven't committed already. So
yeah, the pre-crime, a little wooden ball gets shaven and it rolls down, and Tom Cruise comes and gets you.
That's it.
That's a weird thing too.
No,
but that's interesting though, because that is, eventually eventually we're going to have the data. So go back to the DNA thing. What if you find out that there is a genetic link to psychopaths or rapists or pedophiles, or like, what if you find something in the genetic code that is specific to societal problems that we want to get rid of? So then what happens? You start having babies and going like, oh, you got the gene. I think you're not going to make it. We'll have to find someone who doesn't have it raises a lot of really crazy issues going forward, because eventually we are going to be able to narrow this down to very specific traits, right?
Oh, sure.
And that's, I can
see things like genetically modifying a group of people for long-term space travel.
Yeah, we're gonna have to basically.
And they will be fundamentally different. It'll be a different. What's the right term? It's not a full-on species, right? It'd be
subspecies.
I can't recall the correct word. Like, all dogs are basically just canines, right? But then there are differences in felines, like cats and whatnot. There's a genus or something. Like, it'd be like a subspecies of humanity, and they would be like, all humans are one species right now.
They're the expanse.
They'd be different. It'd be different. Yeah, like the Expanse, like the miners and stuff are all different. And like, yeah, I feel like in a big way, that's the logical conclusion. Like if we go down this path, like, yeah, we're going to end up with different kinds of people. There just is.
Look at like our basketball players. They're all like much taller than basketball players back in the the 1940s or whatever. Because we're selectively
breeding basketball players.
But basically,
that gets a little spiky, but that's the truth of things. Like,
I mean, that's the concern, right? I mean, do you start going like, I mean, well, we were concerned about the Russians doing this during the Olympics, right?
Sure.
Genetically engineering their athletes to be.
There's actually an interesting argument going on about that right now. There's a female athlete who got stripped of her medals because she has too much testosterone.
Yeah,
and it's like unfair for the female side of sports. But you look at a guy like Michael Phelps, who has a great deal of literal physical and genetic differences that allows him to be a better swimmer. Like his body creates half as much lactic acid, so he can push himself further and longer. He has like a wingspan that's longer than his height. He has size 14 feet that might as well be flippers. Like, he's already a little different, and it makes him better at what he does. And it's like, that's not necessarily selective breeding like on purpose, but there you can track the like, genes and stuff. Like, he was born to be the perfect swimmer in a big way. Like,
right, you find the gene for big feet.
I just thought it's funny that he got in trouble for like smoking weed as a performance enhancer, and I'm like, I don't know anybody that's ever had their performance enhanced by that.
Yeah. And that was off season anyway, and that was so dumb.
Bro, like, that was to slow him down. He was literally cracking the side of the swimming pool, so they had to dial him back.
That's funny. But man, it's crazy.
I actually think that they should just take all the limits out, because the thing is, everybody's already figuring out how to get around the doping stuff. Like, for instance, everybody's favorite Tour de France guy, what's his name?
Tour de France apparently is completely
all doped.
Like, they're cheating all the time.
Every single one of them cheaters. Like, they found out, like, they just investigated the main guy. What was his name? The guy that had the testicular cancer? Lance Armstrong.
Lance Armstrong, all right.
So Lance Armstrong, they're like, okay, we caught him doping. Like, it was really hard to do because the doping strategy he was using was like really undetectable. And so they finally figured out, they strip him of like everything, and then they go do the research, and they're like, every single person, even the guy in the very, very back of that thing, every single one of them was doping. Every single one of them was doing blood replacement. Like, they'd go and do this high elevation training to give themselves more red blood cells, and then they would extract the blood and then basically do a blood transfusion hours before the race.
Wow, it's crazy.
Dude, it's like they tried every single thing to cheat. It's like, just let them have it. Like, give them all the drugs and let them do what they want.
You could have like two separate Olympics. You have like the classics Olympic, where it's like you're racing old cars. It's like look, we're all we're gonna run as fast as we can. And then there's another group that then the Olympics become really interesting to me, because I start going like, wow, let's see what genetic engineering they've done to make their runners.
Yeah.
Somebody named it the Roid Olympics. I love it.
Yeah. Do it up. Yeah, max. What is the maximum possibility of human like potential? Like trick it out. Go nuts.
I want to see like UFC where the guys come out and they're like 500 pounds of pure muscle, 0% muscle mass. They can't even knock each other out because their necks are so thick. It's like impossible to even hit them hard enough to knock. And they just go until they get tired, and one guy's like, I'm done. Oh,
it's just, I feel, why not? Like, I want to see Olympics. A dude 12-foot high jump kind of thing, and like, why not?
Because people are already cheating. You might as well at that point, because all you're doing by like banning it is you're just making
in there
people
as well.
Oh yeah, there is a Olympic runner that has a fake leg, like a prosthetic.
The spring legs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how is that not an unfair advantage?
Dude, they can literally run like 30 miles an hour. Like, they're Usain Bolt. Everybody that has them.
How is that not fair?
Yeah.
So
that's what I mean. Like, I just think it'd be really. I think in a way that would level the playing field and make it much more technical for everyone as well, because you've got the whole science aspect on it. I would be much more likely to watch the Olympics if I knew that there was all sorts of like that doping was allowed. There were like any genetic engineering. It'd be just like, oh my God, check out the swimmer who just like lapped everyone else because he's got guilt.
Dude, but then you run into the problem. Like if humans feel like they have to, compete on an unfair level, then everybody gets raised to the lowest common denominator, right? So if you have a guy that can't compete because everybody else has false limbs that make him run 100 miles an hour, then he's going to go get his legs amputated to get the fake legs so that he can run 100 miles an hour. And now you have the Borg, basically. We're all chasing perfection.
Well, and that's the thing I discovered was that people don't. I was working on a documentary for a while that I wanted to do, but the idea was that everyone loves the idea of quote unquote fixing people who are not classically, have all the classic human traits. Like, oh my God, to replace an arm that was missing, to fix a genetic disease that doesn't allow you to move. Of course, technology is fine for that. As soon as you say, I would rather remove my arms and have robotic arms put on, that is evil. And it's like, what? Why? I mean, like, the reality is why? We've always used technology. Like, basically, we're almost defined as human by our use of technology. So why? Of course, the technology will become part of us. We wear clothes to protect us from the elements. We're not running around naked anymore. We've got, we've got footwear. That's why our feet suck at anything other than being in shoes right now. You know what I mean? Like, it's. I feel like we want to, we should be pushing the bounds of this stuff.
Sure, I agree. I like the idea of like that sort of. What is it? Like those video games, the Deus Ex series, where
DS. Oh yeah,
and that's a huge theme in those games. Is like you have like the non-enhanced people versus the enhanced, and there's like a question of okay, I lost my arm and so I replaced it with a robot one, or I don't like my left arm. I want to have the cool like Mr. Gadget kind of thing, and I purposefully choose. And I feel like, how is that any different than plastic surgery?
Yeah,
I don't like my nose, so I have them shave it up.
It really isn't any different.
And so, and why does that make it?
It's actually better because you're improving something, whereas with cosmetic surgery, it's just purely visual most of the time. Not always. Like fixing a cleft palate and stuff is like good, but I think honestly, like if you're doing something that actually improves your performance, improves your quality of life, and makes things better, then I would actually rank that higher than just like cosmetic, like plastic surgery.
We replace hips, we replace knees, we do. I mean, we've got all sorts of replacement stuff. Why wouldn't you choose to do that before it became a problem?
Yeah, I think it's weird. I don't think people are capable. A lot of people aren't capable of just stepping back a few feet and looking at something from the 10,000 foot view. Try to look at it as not a human. Try to look at it as like a species looking. I try to do that thought experiment where it's like I sit around and I'm like, one of the funniest things I always talk about sometimes over on Twitch is if aliens saw us today, like if an alien came here and they're fundamentally different than humans, okay, they're not bipedal, they're asexual and reproduce on their own or clone themselves. What would they think about like humans having sex? They just think it's a weird handshake with different appendages. Like it doesn't from that view. If you step back and you take the humanity out of it, and you try to look at it without that human filter on it. It's like, it's really bizarre. Things like that. It's like we put a lot of value and change how we look at things perceptually and everything. But from an outside observer, if an alien said, okay, I see a guy that can run twice as fast, he's not going to look at him and go, oh my God, he's got 2 fake legs. Why did he do that? He's going to be like, oh, okay, that human actually, why does that human perform better than everybody else? Why is that animal so unique? And study that. They're not going to look at it like, oh my God, that's an abomination. Like, some people would hear.
Well, that's it. So like the abomination, the whole sex thing is really funny. It's like you're drinking a beer. You're basically drinking a yeast orgy.
Yeah.
I mean, like they're replicating. They've replicated and produced this material that we're now drinking. Like
you're mildly poisoning yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I've just put myself off beer for life. But but it's I do think that there's a. I think there is. I think was it you, Barnacules, who was saying that there's basically it's a religious thing. There's almost like there's a sanctity to the human body that people are very nervous about getting rid of, and also I think there's also a fear of missing out to some extent, where I feel like people are like, well, but he can afford to do that. I can't. So why should he be allowed to do that? Which I definitely, having sat through 6 months of pandemic, I can see how that would be frustrating for people.
Oh, yeah, and that kind of brings out the the ethical or the moral argument, right? Is like now you've got that separation again of the haves and have-nots. You're going to have that sort of strata of society who want it really bad or somehow get addicted to augmentation. and will do anything for it, or like, and it kind of ties into the genetic modification thing too. It's like, okay, if I have a job that could be done better by someone who has prosthetic hands, like a 12 fingers or whatever, is it right for me to discriminate, or is that an okay requirement? Like, at what point do you decide where that line is? Like,
we need affirmative action for normal humans.
Kind of. I could hire the guy with normal hands and it'll get done 30% less efficiently, or I could hire the guy with robot hands and get it done faster, and so
that's really interesting, though. Yeah. The idea that unmodified humans would have to basically you'd become historical in a way.
Yeah,
you'd be like, oh, you have to be sort of like grandfathered into things, because if you're not going to genetically or robotically or whatever it's called, mechatronically enhance yourself, then you sort of have to be protected as a historical thing.
Right.
It's interesting. We're already doing that though with robots. Like, there's automation. We already replace humans with automation. So having a human that could, compete with a robot, then you have a higher probability of that person being able to get a job in a world where automation is taking over, right? Because now you have the human thinking element, which the robot doesn't necessarily have, and you got the speed and agility and repeatability of the robot. But again, then everybody ends up going out and getting augmented, and then it's just an endless competition. Then the people with more money get more augmentations, therefore they become, overwhelmingly superior. And
what about LASIK? Like LASIK and glasses and all that. I mean, we're already augmenting ourselves considerably. Hearing aids. I use hearing aids, false teeth, glasses. Eventually, I'm sure someone will come and add hair to me at some point. I hope. I
got some Chia Pet stuff. We'll smear it on there when I see it.
I had I was on set this week and very cool set that they built for this sort of sequence of events, which I can't tell you about. But it was the lighting was very harsh, shall we say? And at one point, someone came up and said, "I think makeup needs to talk to you." And so I went to makeup, and out came this little bottle of, I don't know whether it was like, sliced up human hair or some kind of black dust. But they started like, I was like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, well, we're getting a bit of a bounce from various different parts of your hair. So they had to basically, they're basically painting my head so that it wasn't reflecting back at the camera.
Did the can say GLH on it by chance? Ron Popeil, the guy that created everything, like the Pocket Fisherman and the Smokers and the Grills and everything. Yeah. He literally created that GLH, and it was literally just spray paint for your scalp.
Yeah, basically, but this is it's like a dust, and it comes in a special, I think they probably just make it so that it's more expensive. But yeah, literally, it was like one of those like perfume bottle things. And the guy just sort of, and that was, just to get the lights, just get the reflected light. So I need to be genetically, I need like some kind of genetic
and that's going to get replaced with digital makeup now. Like all the stuff that you're doing, makeup and everything like that, like digital makeup is like insane now, and the technology is getting faster, and now it's so automated that people used to go in and like rotoscope frame by frame and do the digital makeup. Now they can go in and they can just do it on like one frame and have like the deep fakes thing applied across the whole spectrum.
Yeah. So that AI stuff that's going through and doing comps for you, that's able to pull out pixels of the different colors and stuff. Now that stuff's amazing. I mean, you talk about augmented, like what. It's like, or stunt guys. Well, Disney has Stuntronics.
I saw that. That was crazy.
Yeah, because why pay people's health insurance to have them flinging around a set when you can have a robot do it for you?
Yeah, if you guys haven't seen that, they actually created a hydraulic, or it's like hydraulic, or I think it's pneumatic. It's a pneumatic bipedal robot that literally just looks like a stick man. And then what it does, it has a bunch of sensors on it. They track it in frame of the camera, and it does like the jumps and the flips and everything, and sticks the landings, and then they basically just superimpose the actor over it. Like they deep fake the actor onto the robot, and it looks like the actor's doing it. And it's even in their
live shows too, right? So they're actually doing prosthetics over these sort of, as you say, stick men that will do all the stunts for them. I mean, eventually, anything that is potentially dangerous or uncomfortable or possibly damaging to humans will be done by robotics. That is what they are there for.
Everything's going to be fake, and we're all going to be in hover chairs. I'm just ahead of the curve right now.
with the giant Slurpees.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
Like my screen's going to break and be like, wow, we have a pool? Remember, that was my favorite part of that whole movie, WALL-E, is they have this giant swimming pool, and they're in a paradise, and like one of the screens goes off, and they're like, we have a pool? Like their whole life, they didn't know they had a pool, and they were sitting next to it the entire time because they were so glued to the social media.
Oh God, that's my son. That's definitely my son.
I mean, our future's already. Yeah, I think the best argument that's been made as far as like the whole CRISPR genetic engineering and robotics and things like that and augmenting yourself is that, like you said, we're already doing it. But somehow we're trying to distinguish against like altering DNA when we're already doing vaccines, which do just that. We're distinguishing against somebody getting like, robotic limbs that allow them to run faster. And we look at it as, oh, that's helping them fix a handicap. But now the technology's hit a point where it can actually make you fundamentally better than having the human limbs. So there may be an argument now for people actually just getting those, even though they have healthy limbs. And then you run into the ethical argument of like, is that okay for them to do that? But people are already doing breast implants, and people are already doing hip replacements and stuff like that to improve their performance and lower their
breast implants. People are getting their breasts removed for fear of having cancer later. I mean, like, we're definitely able to do a lot of this stuff. And gene therapy is already being used throughout medicine, anyways. The problem is access, right? I guess if everyone has access to it, then it's a different story. But if only certain people have it, you get into some real issues there. Yeah. And who controls this stuff? That's what I think more terrifying than anything else is what is the legislative, what is the governmental, what is the world government stuff going to do about this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I feel like in that sense, it's so woefully, it's so slow. It's so outrageously out of touch. Like I've said this about other topics too, but we still have people in power who are making decisions for 370 million people who still think that like rock and roll is from the devil and that Elvis's hips are evil and like it drives me insane who like barely understand what the internet can be used for, let alone like how it works. And like it drives me nuts that I think all of Congress is made up of either businessmen or lawyers. And like, that's, I can't, that just drives me nuts because like how can you because what'll happen is it'll be a knee jerk reaction to say no. And it will stunt any sort of progress in any of these, the genetic stuff, the robotics, whatever. It'll get to a point where people start getting outraged and they will just stop. They'll make it illegal, and everybody else, the people who are willing to make dangerous risks, who are going to put people in danger to make progress, are going to get ahead.
Yeah,
there are other countries that we know would be happy to do,
it's just like guns. It's like guns. Everybody's like ban. It's like we've already surpassed the point where it's like a simple technology and anybody can just make the stuff in their garage. Like you can 3D print it, you can make it out of sheet metal, you can make it out of like 2 pipes from Home Depot for $10. It's like there's no point. Like I mean, I do understand to a degree that it's like there still needs to be like a system in place and background checks and stuff like that. I totally agree with all that.
Sure.
But I'm just saying that you're not if you convince yourself that by creating a law you're going to stop people from doing things, then you don't understand how laws work. It's like laws allow an individual to basically weigh risk versus reward, right? So if a law comes out that says you do something bad, you have to pay this penalty, there's always going to be people that are like, that penalty is worth the risk, and they're still going to do it. And so, like you said, when it comes to like eugenics and stuff like that, it's like if you have the opportunity to potentially like fix your disease that you have, and a byproduct of fixing that disease is you actually like get more muscle mass, or you get better vision, or you get like some kind of superpowers or something like that, and you're going to be sentenced for it. It's like me personally, I'd rather go to jail and be free of the disease that was going to kill me, pay my debt, and then just get out. And then it becomes worth it at that point. And it's the same argument for a lot of things. that apply to that. But the one that came to mind was guns, because I keep seeing people on Twitter over and over, and I was one of these people too, where I 3D printed a gun like 5 years ago, and I was like, this thing's a piece of shit. I wouldn't trust this like with your life. Like, this thing's terrible. And it turns out that in 5 years they've worked out all the kinks, and now it's like a $200 desktop 3D printer. You can print a functional firearm and buy all the parts that are not classified as a gun, put it together, and have like a reliable working platform. And people are so in denial about that. They're like, no, 3D printed guns don't work. It's like, no, that was 5 years ago when the media picked it up. Now, unfortunately, anybody can just do it. And when I say unfortunately, I'm not saying I'm not against the Second Amendment. I actually own a gun and a lot of ammo myself. But I'm just saying that it's like, you need to understand that the genie's already out of the bottle, so to speak. Everybody already knows how to create these things and how to make these things. So you have to start thinking and taking that into consideration. Same thing with augmentations. If you know that other humans are doing it, like this dude in China is engineering babies that are resistant to a disease we haven't been able to cure. Like one of the few diseases we even like therapeutics are the best we can hope for, because we can't get a handle on this thing because it changes so damn fast. And some dude in China is like, okay, I'm going to take my $700 kit in my garage and make it so children can't even get it in the first place, because we don't have to cure it if they can't get it. And that line of thinking leads to that. It's like, now you demonize that guy for doing that because you're afraid of like what else might come of it. But what you don't realize, that's already happening everywhere, and the pros outweigh the cons. Like,
well, and education.
Yeah, education's the biggest one.
Educate people to use, like, if you're going to own guns, make sure you know what you're doing with them. If you're gonna do genetic engineering, make sure you understand what you're. I mean, because I think people aren't innately evil. Well, maybe there are some, but for the most part, we're not innately evil.
Yeah.
I think we could, if we could just. God, I keep coming back to education. If we could just educate our population, everyone would be, I feel like science would make more sense. The use of guns, the 3D printing of guns, all this kind of stuff becomes less of an issue, because you're not dealing with idiots who don't know what they're doing with these things.
Yeah, and I think that education part is what bothers me about legislation, or like the people in power and whatnot. Is like they just either don't have the time or care or whatever, the inspiration to educate themselves on things. I don't know. It's just,
the guns thing is such a tough one though, because I just don't know. God, like, we're in Canada. There's definitely a lot more shootings in Toronto recently than we've seen in a long time. I definitely feel like it's changing. So maybe we're just slower to pick this stuff up, but the numbers, for some reason, the States is just freaking nuts with this.
It's because there's 10 times more guns than there are people. That's the problem, is you can't compare us to other countries, because from the start, we've been building, importing, and stockpiling this stuff for so long that it's like, even if you pass a law that outlaws it, you can literally walk down the street and like buy a gun from somebody for like $300, like $10 more than it costs to buy from an actual store. No paperwork or anything, because there's just so damn many of them everywhere. So you hit that point where it's like, how do you handle a virus, for instance? Like, let's talk about like COVID. How do you handle a virus once it's hit the point where you can't just rein it in? Right? It's already expanded beyond the scope of reining it in. Then you have to be reactionary to it, right? You have to say, okay, listen, we can't control the virus. It's gone beyond this point. So now we have to figure out other ways to contain it. You can't just keep saying, if we just kill the virus, it's just going to go away. It's like, no, it's not that simple now, because it's spreading faster and you can get ahead of it. So now let's work on a vaccine and work on herd immunity over a long period of time, rather than just the bullet solution we could have used if we caught it early. If we got it early, we'd be like, hey, everybody put on a mask, stay away from each other, scare the shit out of everybody. And now the thing just like dwindles down and nobody has it. So it doesn't spread nearly as fast and you get under control. The same thing could have happened with guns if that was the start, like so many countries it is. Like, people point out Australia. Australia has a massive amount of knife violence. Like everybody that didn't, but violence? They don't have a lot of guns though. That's the thing is, right? They never had a lot of guns in the first place. They literally started out as like a prison colony. So it's like they never had the guns in the first place. So it's easy to rein it in and just stop imports. And it's not going to prevent them from being there, but it's going to lower the numbers to a level where you're not going to look at every single person on the street and be like, dude, how many guns do you have on you? And unfortunately, here in the United States, that's a very real thing. Like,
so maybe it comes down to sensors again. Maybe it's about being able to immediately know whether someone has a weapon or not.
Somebody said, don't call Australia a prison colony. It's racist. Hey, you guys turned it around though. You turned it around.
It's funny though, because I think the guns thing is really interesting, because I've always wondered, like, the problem with guns is that it's such a simple technology. And thus very difficult to stop. Like, You need something. You want something that you want, like a giant magnet. You could throw at a gun that stops it from being able to to actually fire the bullet or something, or some kind of a gel that could, like, you need something to counteract them without having to randomly shoot flying bits of metal back at people. You know what I mean? Like this. I feel like we haven't invested in non-lethal responses to guns. I just there's got to be something else we could do. There's got to be a better weapon.
There is a parallel to be drawn here, though, with the augmentation. We were talking about if somebody gets augmented, then somebody else feels inadequate. They're less hireable, so then they go get augmented themselves. I think guns follow that same technological art. They're an extension of your being. So if you feel threatened and you feel like you're in a world where everybody else is more powerful than you, then you innately want to even up the odds. So you go and get a gun yourself. As a matter of fact, gun sales have gone through the roof here in the United States and broke multiple records because everybody is in fear of what's going on with like protests and riots and stuff like that. The future seems very uncertain, like more uncertain to anybody because of what's been going on here for the last 3.5 years. So everybody's arming themselves to the teeth. And I mean, well, myself included. But at the same time, it's like the only reason that people feel the need to do that in the first place is because they think everybody else already has it. And so it's that same thing. It doesn't matter if it's DNA, it doesn't matter if it's artificial limbs, doesn't matter if it's a weapon, whether it be a knife, freaking acid. Like there's some countries that have no guns where they just throw acid in each other's face. Like what the hell? Who came up with that and how did that proliferate? But it's like people will find a way, right? People always try to find a way to even things up. And we do the same thing at the country level, right? Like nuclear weapons. We don't use nuclear weapons anymore. Like we really don't use them in war anymore because if we do and anybody else does, it fires back on us. So at that point, it just becomes mutually assured destruction. You're like, hey, I got nuclear weapons, you got nuclear weapons, so let's go ahead and stalemate, parlay. And then nothing happens. But if one person had nuclear weapons, everybody's screwed.
Well, and that's the problem is you're worried about rogue states. You're worried about, I mean, I was amazed that when the Soviet Union broke up, that more of these weapons didn't end up, on the black market. I mean, maybe they did. I don't know, but it just I feel like it's the concern is really people who don't have anything to lose, and in many cases that's going to have some kind of a religious backing or some kind of a that somehow this
ideological.
World is, the good word, much better word. I mean, like, this, how many Elon Musks are running around thinking we're living in a virtual simulation, so what does it matter if I blow everybody up?
Yeah, oh, for sure.
That's kind of scary, because that follows the same thing as, like, people that are religious extremists, right? Yeah. If you believe that blowing up a bunch of people is going to, like, give you 40 virgins in some afterlife, I mean, if you genuinely believe that, it's not just something you're telling yourself or you're using as intimidation, but you genuinely believe that, which is something a human is capable of, you don't have any fear. You don't have any kind of remorse. You have no guilt. All the emotions that would rein you in to prevent you from hurting other humans are basically deleted by that new intellectual like mentality that you have towards getting something better. It's like
the Crusaders, the Jesuits wandering around converting the indigenous people to the right God.
Right.
I mean, like,
72 virgins. I guess they upped it.
Oh,
all right.
Either way.
Dude, that makes all the difference. If it was only 40, I was having second thoughts. But 72, no way, man. That'll last me at least 3 months.
I don't know. I feel like we've gotten to a point where there have been a few points in history where we as a species could have wiped ourselves out, especially with the proliferation of nuclear weapons. We could destroy this planet 100 million times over.
Right.
And we haven't. I feel like that is a sign of a fundamental, like, core something about us that we don't really want to. Like, yeah, there have been times where there have been some pretty horrific events that have caused a lot of deaths and destruction and things, but generally we're not out to kill each other to that extent. We would have, right? Like you say, like there's like the extremists, whatever ideology it comes from. Like, I feel like if anything, the 9/11 event shows that a collection of properly motivated people can get something horrific done if they really, really want to. There's no stopping it, really. And
you have to go against nature too. That's the other thing, right? Like, you're not naturally going to want to kill anybody unless the benefits outweigh the cost, like we were talking about earlier, right? It's a cost benefit analysis.
Yeah, I feel like if the desire was really there by enough people, it would have been done. There's how many there's like the Cold War stuff where they thought maybe the Soviets had people injected into high level placements in government and stuff. If they really had, then they would have been able to get themselves to a position where they could have blown ourselves up, where they could have blown us up from within.
And surely China could shut us down anytime they want at this point. I mean,
if they really wanted to.
I mean, they just stop importing every piece of electronics. I mean, it's just what do we have that isn't made in China now? I mean, I feel like in a way what you want is you almost want a situation where we are dependent on each other, because then there's no reason for us to, like, China wants us to buy their goods and their goods. China wants our services or our I don't know, films or whatever the hell they want from us. So if we could somehow have some kind of an uneasy trade agreement with everybody, I feel like we'd be in a much better situation.
I totally agree. There's a point where it's like we really all need to be better about getting along with each other, because in a big way we are all dependent on each other. If China decided to stop exporting to the United States and said like, okay, we're just gonna send it all to the UK. Well, the UK is gonna probably end up sending it to the US anyway, or whatever. Like one way or another, like the
TikTok thing's interesting that way.
Yeah.
The way they say, like, you got to sell TikTok simply because somebody got pissed off that all the TikTokers don't like it. But also the fact that China says, okay, that algorithm that is the innate value of TikTok, that algorithm that allows you, makes it so effective and so addictive, that's a trade secret that cannot be exported. It's actually really smart. I gotta say that, I mean, from China's, that is a brilliant little parry from China on that, I would say.
Yeah, it's just we're all more interconnected than we'd like to think.
Well, I mean, I feel like when I first saw that picture of the Earth from the moon, I went, well, this is the end of countries. Like, I really felt like that we should like from that picture, I get it's one ball.
We already have a space station with like everybody on it. Like
we're all there. Yeah.
And they get along. They get along and eat each other's food.
Pieces. If you're gonna, we're gonna pollute, but you're not going to. You're gonna it's all the same. We're literally the same air.
I was just reading about something it was related to nuclear power and the fight against climate change and things like that. It's like Germany shut down all of their nuclear power plants a while back and started buying electricity from like France and Russia. But that caused Russia to build like 7 new coal-fired plants in Siberia. Great. So it's like Germany isn't polluting as much anymore, but in order to offset that, Siberia is now pumping out even more. It's like it ties to that we're all interconnected. Like you can't.
We're being forced in close.
We're gonna just have
That's the other big problem is all the technology makes us closer every day. Like the fact that we can travel around the world now, like without having to like have layovers and stuff, because like the Dreamliner, and we got like spaceships we're working on Virgin Atlantic, like putting us into like low Earth orbit and stuff. It's like everyday technology puts us closer. The Hyperloop, if they ever figured that thing out, which I don't know if they will, but if they do, I mean, everything gets closer and closer the faster that we can safely travel, right? So it's like we eventually get to that point where it's like we used to be able to have a distance. It felt like they were literally a world away, but now the world isn't very big. So it feels like we're all in the same sandbox. It's like China, even everything made in America, 90% of what you buy that's made in America contains Chinese components. It does, because we don't manufacture electronics here very much.
In America.
Yeah, and the things that we do manufacture, the electronics are made from subcomponents that are made in China, because we just don't make like capacitors and resistors and stuff like that. And the capacitors
we don't want to pay for them.
Exactly, we don't want to pay for them. That's what it comes down to. Is China, as much as I hate to admit it, it's like you cannot compete with the labor of China. Their labor sucks, but like in their culture, that's like the jobs that they have. If you take those jobs away from them, they have nothing. You're not helping them unless you replace it with something better. That's the thing is you have all these people that just want to cancel stuff. It's like, let's just take this away. Let's just take this away. This is not good. We need to stop this from happening. But nobody takes a step back again and looks at it and says, what does that mean for those people?
Scientists understand that there are reactions. Everything you do, there's going to be consequences to whatever you do.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you have to consider that stuff. You can't just, as you say, you can't just go like, okay, that's it. We're off oil. Done.
Yeah, oh man, those child labor camps or whatever where they're working for $1 a day. We need to stop those. And then you're like, but you don't realize that $1 a day where they lived was what kept them alive and kept their family alive. You take that away and you shut that down, they're not guaranteed to find another job. You have to make it better. You have to.
And suddenly you're paying $5,000 for your iPhone.
Exactly. But that's what we need to do is condition ourselves over time that $5,000 for an iPhone is okay. And we make enough money that $5,000 isn't that big of a deal for most people.
If it's not killing children.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm willing to pay a little extra for my phone.
But we ignore it. That's the biggest problem is anything that we feel like we can't change immediately, we just ignore. And that happens with everything. Doesn't matter. I mean, I could pretty much name any topic, and there's something to be said about what we ignore that we can't change. In this specific one with China, it's like, okay, we know that there's child labor going on over there. We know that like shoe companies like Nike and stuff like that. Oh, we're appalled when we found out. We're going to close those factories down, and then they basically like sublet to another company, and that other company's using child labor through a third party, and now their hands are clean because they're like, oh, well, that company says they don't use child labor, but they do. It's like because they know that they can't fix it. There's no other alternative. Otherwise, they got to sell their shoes for $500. Nobody's buying the shoes, and they're screwed. So what we really need to do is just condition over time, like recognize it. Just say, listen, yes, we do this. This sucks, but this is the only way that it works. So we need to figure out how to make our economy stronger so that we can actually afford to pay enough that they can afford to pay their employees enough, and it becomes lucrative, and they cut them off if they don't. Like start pulling back if you don't, but you have to have an alternative. That's the thing is so many people want, and I'm guilty of this too. I like to throw myself into the pot because I'm just as susceptible as any other human being. You know, we ignore things. We purposefully ignore. It's blissful ignorance, right? It's like I don't think about like where the raw minerals came for my battery and the lithium and stuff in my phone, right? I don't think about those things. I don't think about my car. Like, where did the steel really come from? Like, I know the factory that made it, but like, where did the ore come from? Like, what, or diamonds and precious metals and gold and stuff like that. It's like there's kids that are smelting gold out of the ground. They're not smelting, but they're getting stuff out of the ground. They're using mercury with their bare hands to attach onto the gold and make it heavy so they can sift it out. And it's giving them like but we ignore all that because at the end of the day, it's like, we create so many layers of abstraction that we can say, oh, well, we're not responsible because that company told us, and that company told us, and that company told us, and then the evil little company at the end is just ignored because we never get that far down the line. It would be better for us to just acknowledge that, listen, this is a reality. This is happening, and as much as it sucks, as long as we know it's there and it's happening, we can start to move towards doing something. It doesn't have to be overnight. It doesn't have to be next week, but we should actively be, everything that we do from here on out should be to correct that problem and replace it with something better and work with those countries and try to find a better program. Be like, listen, China, we are willing to pay, instead of putting a big tariff on everything that we end up paying, let's say, China, we are willing to pay 50% or 100% or 5,000% more for these specific products if you can show us unequivocally that you are not using child labor, and you can prove to us and allow us to inspect it and verify that this stuff isn't happening from from farm to table, basically. Go look at this stuff. That we're willing to pay more if you do that. Make it lucrative for them to make the change.
What if you did like it never used to be required to have all the ingredients of food, and we started putting ingredients on all of our packages? What if everything we bought had a rating system that could, so right away you'd know if it had a red thing on it, it means that yes, that's really cheap, but people died to make this, or kids died or whatever, and you can have different ratings for everything that you buy, so that everything you buy, you are faced with that dilemma every time, where you go, okay, there's 2 peanut butters here. I can pay 3 cents more for this one, which has this rating, whereas this one has a rating that I don't want to be a part of. I'm willing to pay that extra money for that. But the idea, again, from an educational standpoint, if you know what you're getting into, I think that's part of the thing, is that we're able to ignore this stuff. If it's on a label, like if it's like when you pick up that cigarette pack and there's those freaking horrible lungs that you have to look at, you know you're making that decision. You're going like, yep, those are my lungs. Lighten up. But that's fine. People can make those choices if they're willing to make that choice. But as long as they know they're making that choice, so that no one's being able to say like, what? I didn't know. Like now it's like, no, the iPhone has a freaking sticker on it that it has like a little thermometer that when it hits red, it means that this is a horrible thing, and horrible things are being done to get you this phone. Or it's down in the green. Maybe that's what we should be fighting for.
Yeah. And like, there's been some question too. Is like, well, like, how can I make a difference? Like, we're talking monolithic companies who are trying to squeeze out every dime of profit they possibly can, and it's I feel like it's similar to the food waste argument, right? Your mom always telling you, oh, there's starving kids in Africa. Don't eat all your dinner.
Right.
Send them
my mac and cheese. Yeah.
When the truth of the matter is, the vast majority of food waste comes from the grocery store that's throwing out shit that they think is unsellable, or the farmers who let their crops just go to waste because they don't want to break a quota or whatever, or there are subsidy laws and things where they get paid to not grow food or what have you, and like I'll do the best I can within my circles of influence. I'll make certain choices that do the best. It's like even as something as simple as like being vegetarian. It's like, honestly, it's not like, I don't give a fuck about how else are we supposed to feed 400 million people with beef outside of the factory farm way that we do things?
Yeah, more for me.
That is the way of it. But like in small steps, small changes within, I choose to do certain things. And by doing so, I can kind of affect the people around me with a similar thought process, and then they make small changes and so on and so forth. I feel like those things can make a big difference over time.
Yeah,
and yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and again, for me, I'll tell you, like, one of the biggest eye-opening things for me was I remember going to like Burger King at a rest stop on a drive up from LA or something, and there are the calories on each one of those things you're ordering. It makes you think about it. You go like, holy crap, that's
right?
Like 4,000 calories with the fries? And I don't need that. You know what I mean? Whereas if I don't know that, it's very easy to ignore that. And it's also very easy for me to ignore it if I want to. If I go like, no, you know what? I had a bad day. I want 50,000 fucking calories right now.
Yep.
Deep fry it, covered in cream.
But you're not lying to yourself. That's a conscious well, I won't say educated, but it's a conscious decision, right? When we make it. It's like we know that we're getting 1,300 calories from this 8-ounce drink from Starbucks. And we're not going to drink as many of them because of that. And we're probably going to enjoy it more because we know that it's a treat now. Like it's not, it's like if somebody gave you crab every day of your life, like crab and lobster, which by the way, that was actually poor people food back in the day. There's a lot of poor people foods that became food. Exactly. That was prisoner food. Like you eat this trash from the sea. Yeah. Like you don't get the decadent, foods that today are like free. But yeah, you get that and you'd appreciate it more because you're like, that like what you're putting into your body, like if it's a certain degree of bad or too many calories or how much it costs, like the decadence of it. It's like having that information is like what makes you like perceive it is better than it actually is. Like when you go to a restaurant and you order a steak, somehow it tastes better than cooking it yourself. I won't say this for chefs though, but I'm just saying if I go cook a steak, I can do that at home. I can do that at home. How to do that. Right, but it's kind of special. You go to like a nice restaurant, like the Schwartz Brothers, like Daniel's Broiler or something. They bring you $100 steak, and it's like that. That it's a good steak, but it's like you could make that steak at home. Like you probably could even make a better steak.
There's nothing stop you from finding. Yeah,
exactly. But there's something special about it because of the environment, the person that's serving it, dude shining a flashlight on it and making sure that it's exactly how you want it. There's something about the experience that makes it better. And and like same thing with like the seafood and everything. It's like we place a higher value on that now because it's expensive, but realistically it was just trash that fishermen like didn't even want, right? They just gave it to the prisoners.
And I buy the tuna cans that have the dolphin free now. That's like that's the only ones that show up in our house now. We don't buy the other ones.
Are there any that don't say dolphin free?
I know. Well, that's the problem. Is I think it needs to be you need some really good. You need to know. Well, but again. Technology. We've got the technology to track this stuff.
Yeah, and campaigns of shame, right? Like if it was all over the news that Starkist or whatever didn't care and they were scooping up dolphins and stuff. That was like back in the early 90s or something. It was a big deal. And so they make public pressure, they make change. And so I feel like if it were more obvious that Apple is literally killing children to make the iPhone, and I'm just singling them out. It's all of these electronics manufacturers are. Heck, it was kind of a big deal when people were throwing themselves off of the roofs of Foxconn factories. That was kind of a big deal for a little while.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then they made some changes and a little bit of things to tweak the image and things. But like, I'm sure that's still going on. Like those factories are still terrible. And but it's like when it's exposed, when it's obvious and people get outraged, they make those changes. And like, it's just, there's so much to be outraged about. There's so much change to be had that like, I understand why it can be overwhelming and tiring for individuals. It's like, pick a few things. Like, there's only so much you can do, and just try to do the best that you can.
Just do something.
Well, I think you do have to worry about that. You do have to worry about the point of people getting to that level where they just go like, I whatever, give me the freaking fine. I'm killing babies. Give me my freaking cell phone. I think you need like, I love the idea of knowing, at least knowing. So you're just reminded about this stuff, because I feel like that's a big part of my issue, is that, I mean, you know, me and Barnacules and our ADHD, it's just so easy to bounce onto other things, right? Yeah. Whereas if it's constantly in your face, like, you know, you are, you know, we get a lot of, because of the pandemic, we have a lot of food delivered now. So we're getting different brands of, like, I don't know, coconut milk or whatever the hell we're having. I don't know where that came from. I don't know where it's sourced from. I don't know what tin they're using to put it in. I don't know, like, all that stuff.
Like, this palm oil is delicious. Where did this come from?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think we need to know this stuff, you know, whether we want to or not.
I think people just like to be one thing I've learned over like the last 4 years is that people like to be lied to. They do. Like we all do. It doesn't matter. Like even politics aside, just people like to be lied to. If you have somebody that can literally take the brunt of something and sugarcoat it for you, then you don't feel like you're guilty at all doing it. It's the same thing with like meat. It's like, I intentionally watch the documentaries where they have factory farms like ripping chickens' heads off and torturing them and kicking them around, because I want to stop supporting those types of farms and buy my chicken from farms that ethically do things. And other people may have different alignments of what they consider ethical, but at the same time, it's like, if I'm ignoring what I think is ethical to do something that I want, then it's probably not worth doing. Like again, like, it's like, if I found out that a bunch of kids are dying making my phone, that's going to make me like really rethink the phone. But can I survive in a modern culture without a phone with what I do and the job that I do? So what I do is, instead of stop buying the phone, I would start leaning on companies heavily to be like, hey, knock, knock, I know what's going on here. I'm willing to pay an extra $500. Just stop this shit and show me. Don't tell me. Don't go find a company that alleviates your guilt, just like I was using you for. Like, show me, like, the farm to table. I want to know where every single component for that phone came from. I'll pay the extra. I want to know where everything came from and it's put together. And I want to know at the end that there was no possibility for you to sub in things and do things behind my back. And if you get caught doing that, there's huge penalties because everybody's eyes on you. And is that worth paying more for? Yes, absolutely. But again, you have people that may not be able to afford it anymore because now it's outside of their reach because of that. And so what you have to do is fight each problem independently, right? Okay, the cost may go up in the interim to have a company that is child labor free. But then you may have some other companies that unfortunately are still using child labor, but that's the only way that people can get their electronics. So now we got to figure out, how do we fix the economy so that we can actually bring the average wage up to something where people can afford to not buy stuff. We've become dependent on China, where our wages have come way down because you can survive on less money because of China. If you take that out of the equation and you boost it up and everybody's getting paid a better wage for what they're doing, which of course there's a lot of implications for the whole economy across everything. But if you do that and you bring it back up to where it'd be if we were domestically manufacturing everything, then we wouldn't have these problems, because we would be able to domestically manufacture these things for similar prices of what we get them from China, if the ethics were involved and people had a higher quality of life and a higher wage.
If that was important to people. Yeah.
And you can't solve that overnight. That's the biggest thing, is everybody's like, oh, you got to do this knee-jerk reaction. You got to do this. You got to put a tariff on them. You got to just hit them where it hurts. You just got to do this. And it's like, nobody's thinking before they're doing. You have to have a plan. Like, what's the long-term strategy? Not what makes me feel good tomorrow that just goes away or causes a whole new problem. Like, a thought-out process and a strategy says, over the next 5 years, these are the 100 steps that we're going to do, that once we get to the end of those 100 steps, there is no way for us to import a product from China that had child labor, or if we have to have concessions and there is child labor, that it was paid fairly and it was in a safe environment. And so that we're not completely destroying whatever their culture is, but ethically we are ensuring that humans are protected and that humans are the priority. Like, that
that extra money goes to the right people.
Exactly.
Right? If you're paying extra, you don't want to just have them making more profit off those kids.
Exactly. If I'm paying another $500, that better be going to the family of the person that made that phone, and then they're going to enjoy their job.
A really nice school for re-educating these kids.
Right. Exactly. And then you get a better product out of it too.
I think that is a big chunk of the problem, and this might be started leading into a weird sort of like economic discussion or societal problem. But like, a huge issue is the concept of like perpetual profit, right? Like at some point, a company should be able to say, like, we're only going to have this much profit every year. Like it can't always be more. It can't, like, you know, and it goes from the whole corporate structure. Like something I when I was working at Starbucks that I discovered, our store would make a certain sales quota, right? Well, next quarter it would be 3% more, and that was it was constant. It was infinite. They expected infinite growth, nonstop. We would get in trouble if it ever plateaued, if it ever stagnated. Wow. But there's only so many people in the area. Like how are we supposed to sell more to people who don't want to be sold to or who already have our product? And that goes all the way up the chain. Like at what point is it enough? Like, is it okay? Like, when is it okay for Starbucks to say, you know what, we're only going to make 20 million a year every year, and that's it? Like, we don't have to make 25 million next year and 30 million the year after and 40 million the year after, and constantly hope that and push and strive and kill people.
Welcome to the stock market.
to make constant profit. I think it's insane.
Or
it's
pay
insane.
taxes so that we can use those profits towards things that might be of some use to people.
Yeah, like, and at what point, like, when did it become a bad thing to reinvest profits? Like, what about a company that posts no profit but says, I spent all of the money coming in to reinvest back into our people, into the processes, into the product? Like,
there's that great shoe company that would sell that you'd buy a pair of shoes and they would give a pair of shoes away for every pair of shoes that they sold.
Tom's or something, right?
Yeah, that went horribly sideways though. So
did it?
It turned out that the people that were getting the shoes like literally lived in villages where they didn't wear shoes, and it was like culturally significant for them not to wear shoes. So the shoes just weren't getting used and literally were just creating garbage. They're like, would you please just give us the money that it took? Like, even if it's $1, like, give us the $1. It's more useful to us than the shoes, because in our location we can't wear shoes because the way the ground is, the way we walk, and the way we feel our way around, our entire culture is no shoes. And they're like, we're gonna give shoes to these guys because they look like they need shoes. They didn't even think to like ask them first, like, would you rather have the $1 to make the shoes, or do you want a pair of shoes that just go in a pile?
Oh, that's interesting.
So there's a documentary on Netflix about that one too that I watched, where it's like it was like Good Intentions or something, and it was these different companies, and Tom's was one of them, that basically donate a product or a service to these countries, and it turns out that it was something that was never really needed or wanted, and it was a publicity stunt for those companies to do it. It was like an advertising thing, like, buy the shoes, and we give shoes to the kids, because they didn't think that it would be as well received to say, oh, buy shoes, and we give $1 because that's what it costs to make our shoes, because they don't want to disclose that to the public, how cheap their shoes are and what their profit margin is. So it's
it'd be nice if the valuation of the company was on their global impact as well, right? I mean, not just not just what money they can make for their investor, but what their investment is making for, to the planet as well. Yeah, would be kind of neat.
Actually, what if companies disclose their margins? Like, just like you go in and you see the calorie count on a burger that you buy from McDonald's. What if companies had to disclose what their actual profit margin was minus labor and wages, so that you could be like, oh, wow, this Louis Vuitton purse I bought has a 57,000% markup. And you look at it and you're like, okay, that might actually change your mind. You'd still buy it, if you wanted it really bad, but you might, just like with the burger, you consciously think of it and you're like, oh, if I'm buying this, the majority of the money isn't going to the people that are making this thing. It's going to the corporate entity, or artificially boosting the stock. And that might change how people look at products. And companies may actually be less greedy in an attempt to be more friendly to people. It's no longer about this phone's $50 cheaper. If they only make 10% margin where the other company makes 60% margin, you might be willing to spend a little bit extra to make sure that you buy a product that supports its internal community more.
We need like Anonymous to go in and get all the margins from all the big companies and like post it on the internet. Yeah, because I think cool masks.
So this costs, I think, a little over $200 is what Apple pays for all the labor, all the manufacturing, all the components in an iPhone XS Max that sells for over $1,000.
Yeah.
So their margin is insane on their technology, and so I think their iPhones are the most. iPads,
but you'd have to keep research and stuff in mind as well, though, right?
It would change constantly. Yeah.
Like to start off, I guess you'd have because at the same time you don't want to put people off innovating stuff as well. And that's always the ridiculous thing with pharmaceutical companies, right?
That's the argument, right? But what else? What are you doing with $140 billion in cash just sitting there doing nothing if you're not really innovating anything?
Who would have thought? they were freaking dead. They were dead. Microsoft had to buy stocks, for God's sake. Yeah. They were fucked.
It's like, I don't know.
Microsoft still owns some ungodly, like 2 or 3% or something of Apple. It's crazy how much they still have.
I remember when they were dying. Like, it was like,
not only that, but Apple's store, Apple's marketplace, a large chunk of it is actually hosted on Azure, which is Microsoft's cloud technology, because Apple found it was cheaper to just lease it from Azure to get the processing power than to build their own enterprise. And AWS and Google were more expensive. They were able to negotiate a deal. And since Microsoft had an investment in Apple, they already had that relationship, and Microsoft benefits from Apple stock going up. So they're like, sure, let's host your shit and give you a good deal. It's going to make your stock go through the roof because, you're selling more product and you have more money. So your valuation's higher. And so Microsoft basically is just like, oh, we're going to create a condition where your stock goes up and we make more money. So it's like almost using your that's why you don't see Microsoft really go hard against Apple anymore. Like the whole Scroogle campaign and stuff, when they were back there going after Google and going after Apple and everything, that was shooting themselves in the foot. Because they want Apple to prosper. Like, of course, they have areas that overlap where they compete, like on the operating system and stuff. But realistically, at the end of the day, if Microsoft cripples Apple, they cripple themselves. And so it makes sense for them to actually not super promote Apple, but not to attack them. And that's why you don't see them going hard. Like Samsung and Apple are going at it like every 5 minutes. Right. Like those two companies are at each other's throats. But Microsoft just kind of sits back and they're like, we make money if you make money. So you're not really the enemy anymore. We've put you in a position where it's like, we make money either way. Microsoft wants to step away from the operating system game. That's why they're trying to convert everything over to Linux, and they're trying to create an open source kernel and stuff, WSL2 and stuff. Eventually, they just don't want to make, the operating system anymore. Maybe the UI.
No, could you imagine trying to freaking do tech support for that many freaking operating systems? Like, and the generations that are using it are all older anyway, so they're all the ones you don't want on the phone.
It's the most expensive product that Microsoft made to support. Like by far, like even more than Office, more than SQL Server, the operating system cost of support was higher than any other product in the company when I worked there. But it was also the most profitable until Azure overtook them. Now Azure is the most profitable product that Microsoft makes.
They were really smart with that.
So they're trying to get out of the operating system game. So because they're like, well, let's let Apple waste all their resources creating OS 10. Let's let the Linux guys just keep improving and releasing this free code. Let's let them all support the ecosystem and the underpinnings, and we're just going to focus on the services. Because Microsoft wants to charge you for Office 365. They want to charge you for your mailbox. They want to charge you like using Bing rewards and harvesting your data and selling it and doing advertisers. They want to make all their money off of you using services. They don't want to make their money off of selling you a one-time license. That's not for long term. That's never been good because Microsoft always reports earnings, and it's like once you sell Windows 10, now you have to maintain that thing for like 7 years, and you're not getting any more money from maintaining it. Right. Like more licenses will sell, but whether or not you release the update, you're not really affecting the bottom line. Like that's work that you're putting into it. But with the service, and they even tried to make Windows. I don't know if you knew this, but Windows was supposed to be like back in Windows 7, it was supposed to be a subscription service. They were, instead of licenses, they were going to have you install an operating system that just checked with the cloud like Steam does, and you would just re-up and pay like, $19.95 a month for your operating system. And in return, they would give you all their services, Office 365, they would give you everything under the hood, all their online stuff, all is one big package deal. So basically your computer would be like a Chromebook or something like that, where it's all based on their online services. And you pay for it, but they found the internet just was never at a place where they could guarantee that this would work everywhere. Like the bandwidth involved in connectivity and reliability of that connection and everything like that. So they just abandoned it. And they tried to come back to it several times when I was there, talking about it in meetings, talking about it at the company, like the big company meetings. They'd be like, okay, we're going to move to the subscription model. And then like weeks later, they'd abandon it. They did that like 3 different times when I was working there. And they're like, yeah, the internet's just not where it needs to be for this. Research that we've done showed that, because piracy is so high on the Windows operating system, that people are going to have a tendency to lean towards privacy rather than doing a monthly model. Like people will inherit, like people are willing to spend more for a one-time license, knowing that they have it forever, versus paying a small fee every single month and knowing at some point they're going to pay more, no matter what.
I find I'm changing that though. I find that I used to feel that way, and now I'm definitely more of the okay. You know what? I can, instead of ponying up like thousands of dollars for software, I'm happy to do, a monthly thing for a lot of stuff. Like Adobe, the number of times we had to buy copies of Photoshop and stuff at a huge cost.
Oh yeah.
And it was out of, all of a sudden it's like, what? It's out of, what? Again? There's a new one out? So.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas now at least I feel like the subscription I've got, I'm always covered.
And then we like mindlessly we get so many subscriptions because the other day I counted. I was like, I disconnected my cable, and to replace my cable, I got Hulu, Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime Video, HBO, CBS Now, and YouTube Premium. Altogether, I'm paying like $140 a month or something for all these like live streaming services. And it's like the cable I replaced it with was like $80. And when I started, I only had like 2 streaming services. But then I'm like, oh, I want this program. Oh, I don't get this program anymore. I don't get this series anymore. And I kept tacking them on and on and on. And because no one of them is more than like $9, your mind looks at it like it's cheaper, even though it isn't. It's kind of like when taxes, like
Smart
taxes.
marketing.
Taxes is actually a really good example of this because like, you'll do your taxes at the end of the year and you'll be like, wow, I got more money back than I thought I would because of this tax law and this tax law changing. And you're like, wow, I actually got some tax relief. Look at this money I got back. But then you go back and you look and you're like, oh, the cost of living went up because of the tariff. The price of this went up because of this other thing. Supply got broken up because of this. And you go through and you're like, okay, I paid an extra $3,000 this year and I got an extra $300 back. But that $300 is all in one amount. Yeah, right. It's instant gratification. If you're not watching it, you don't realize that you're spending a lot more money because it's just nickel and diming you over the year. And then you're just spending a little bit more and you're like, oh, $1 here extra isn't that bad. Oh, the price of this went up by like $3, no big deal. But you don't realize by the end of the year, you spent like $3,000 on these millions of different things, but you only got $300 back from the legislature that actually caused you to pay that extra $3,000 in the first place. So it's this blissful ignorance. If you don't step back and look at the whole picture as a whole and pull in as many variables as humanly possible, you can make things look really good when they absolutely are not.
God, I wish they would just tell me how much tax I owe. Like, I feel like the whole tax system is based on trying to screw the government out of us. Like, they're basically saying, okay, come on, what do you got? Try to screw us out of as much tax as possible. As opposed to just going like, I'd rather just go like, you know what? Just tell me what I owe. Like,
There's no reason why it can't be that way.
No.
They all have the right information.
They do. They have more information than you do.
Yes.
It's like why the IRS doesn't bother to go after like big billionaires and stuff in their taxes is because it would be too complicated to audit them.
Right.
They could.
Whereas
they have the manpower, they have the knowledge, the information, but because it's easier. Yeah. The fight would be simpler and it's just easier to fight the middle guys or the little guys. But it's like it's all there and they could easily just send you a bill at the end of the year or whenever they want, basically. And it's just done. Yeah, they could. And because otherwise, how do they know to audit you? How do they know that you didn't pay them the right amount of tax? Yes. They know how much you're supposed to pay. So why do they leave it in my hands?
They're comparing what you're reporting with what they have to see if you're trying to lie or cheat or something like that. But if you mess up something in their favor where they get more money, you won't get an audit. You'll never get an audit that says, "Oh, we owe you $5,000." You only get an audit if their information shows that you owe more, not less.
Yeah. And it's such a weird system because it's so combative.
It's like so bad.
You're basically being asked to do as much as you can to screw us over. But if you cross that line, you're going to jail.
Exactly. Don't mess with the IRS. You can't fight.
No, it's true. So true. No, it's interesting. I mean, we've got a problem with basically everything in the world. That's fantastic.
Everything in the world is broken. We just got to pick some things and start working on it. Like, don't just give up.
I'm gonna start putting stickers on things as to how many people they kill. I'm gonna run around with I have like a little like sheet of stickers.
Like you get like a bill of lading with this, or it like shows that's like how many, even with the dot like averaged out, like how many children died to create this device, how many people like lost their jobs, how many new people got employed. Like literally have stats for like each monthly VAT.
How freaking great would that be? Even if it was just like a little app that you could just point it at the thing and it could tell you that.
Oh god, what if it popped up with notifications? Like you're watching Hulu or whatever, and it pops up and it's like today 47 people died building the new data center in New Brunswick or something. It's like you're like, damn. You'd probably look at things a lot differently. I bet you it would change your outlook a lot on things.
The show you're watching is funded by a company that's done this, and this, and this. Yeah, that'd be amazing. It would change the world though, because that's information, right?
It would. Information's
that's a freedom of information that I think would be amazing.
Yeah, hey, I want to thank a couple of people real quick. Dingo on my 40, thank you for the $2 super chat. He said, then the eugenics wars will begin. He's talking about earlier. Yeah, I mean, we're already kind of there, right? With people doping up with steroids and people, making body modifications and going and getting plastic surgery and stuff like that. It's like, it's already happening, right?
People powdering my head.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like spray painting David up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Johnny Winter, thank you for the 50 DKKs. He said, how much has the YouTube not sending out email notifications affected your viewership? I get tons of people that message me every time I stream going, oh my God, I didn't know you're streaming. It doesn't go out. YouTube has a really weird mechanism that they use for sending out emails. Basically, unless I upload videos, not live streams, I have to upload a video, and it has to get a certain percentage of viewership within the first couple of hours for it to be promoted again and again and again. And they determine how many people they send emails to based on initial engagement. And there's no initial engagement on a live stream because until we're done with the live stream and it publishes as a video, the viewership's relatively low compared to a standalone video. Like if I upload a standalone video, it'll get like 50,000 views in like 8 hours. Whereas if I do a live stream, it's only going to get maybe like 7,000 views in 4 hours. And then when it goes public, it's already past that point where they're going to promote it. That's why you'll rarely see these live streams show up as a video when you're going through like your apps and just looking at your subscription channel.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so and whenever when I used to upload videos, and I need to get back to that, by the way. When I used to upload videos, it actually did change the viewership and how many people got notified on average when I did this. But YouTube can't notify everybody in the world because there's so much video content and so many live streams. It's like the amount of power that it would take to send a notification to everybody is astronomical. So what they do is they have a weighted system that goes in that says, listen, if the live stream starts and like 20,000 people hit it immediately because of like external mechanisms, then they know that the video has a lot of popularity in cloud. So then they'll push out more more notifications. Now, depending on the percentage of those notifications that come back and those people join and start watching the stream, they'll determine if it's still weighted at a point where they should do another wave and another wave and another wave. And that's why sometimes you won't get notifications until like a half an hour after the streamer started. Is because they're literally deciding whether or not you're a person that will have a high likelihood of engaging on that live stream or not. So it's an incredibly complicated algorithm. It's so complicated, in fact, not a single person that works at Google knows the entire thing. It's literally like the Keebler Elves recipe for like cookies. It's like nobody has all the ingredients. Everybody knows their little portion of the algorithm, and when you cram it all together, it's this miraculously complicated automation.
And that's like by design, right?
It
like
is.
even
Absolutely.
the Google search algorithms, like it's kind of black box. Everybody only works on a little piece of it. There's no way of looking. You can't see the full algorithm, the full search algorithm. It's,
right.
I think on purpose it's hidden on purpose, but also the thing is just so large and complicated that you kind of can't.
They don't want people to manipulate it too. That's the other thing is everybody finds whenever they found out historically how the algorithm worked, because usually some employee would leak it at Google to their friends, and I'll be honest, I even know people that work at Google that gave me some heads up on things back in the day. But it was getting to the point where you had these channels that were figuring out how to perfectly manipulate the algorithm to move them to the top, even when their content wasn't by far the most popular.
They're always going to game the system.
Exactly.
Always.
So now it's a moving target. Like it's literally using like AI, neural networks, machine learning. All that stuff is being leveraged now from the Google search engine to constantly manipulate and shift what is popular and what isn't, and switching things up randomly. So there really is no way to like completely get a beat on the system. There's all these people that create videos that are like, oh my God, I figured out the algorithm. Do this and put in these tags and put in these titles. And like certain things will help you get more SEO, but there is no longer an end all be all, do exactly this, make this video exactly this length, and you'll get this kind of engagement. Because if somebody was able to zone in on that, then everybody would start doing it. And the people that are more likely to abuse the algorithm are going to be the people that make the shittier content. Right. Like just because if they make good content, they'll just grow automatically and organically. Like if you feel you need to game the algorithm, it's because you are not making content that YouTube wants to put in front of people.
Watch.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's why the drama channels were like just running unchecked, and now they're not anymore. Like the drama channels were like huge, and now they're up in arms because their stuff isn't being advertised, isn't being put in SEO. But it's because YouTube took a stance and said, listen, if you're going to make negative content that involves, being critical of other YouTubers and stuff like that and attacking the community, we're going to go ahead and pull some of your SEO. You can still publish your videos here. You can still advertise through your own social media, but we're going to try to make a habit of not putting those things in front of people, even if that's the content that they show that they want to watch the most. YouTube will still drop the weight on it so that it has less likelihood than popping up than positive content. It's very bizarre. And then the news is the exact opposite. When it comes to the news, YouTube has like a completely different algorithm, and you can tell when you look at those two categories, because in news, the more dramatic and more clickbaity is, the higher it moves up SEO. Whereas that's not the same for the regular content. Like when I go in and look at the regular content and I'm flipping through it, I'm more likely to see things from like Destin, from Smarter Every Day, more intellectual stuff. I see a lot more stuff that's showing up that's of an educational nature. Lot less vulgarity. Like every once in a while, I'll still get a pop up with a video that might have some vulgarity in it, but it's actually pretty rare when those are the videos that I watch the most. Like undeniably, like I watch this guy called Meat Canyon. Look him up. It's like it's the most over the top shit you've ever seen in a cartoon. I don't even know how they even allow it on YouTube. But him and Bird, I watch every video that both of them produce, and they never ever show up in my suggestion box. Never. I have to literally go to my subscriptions, click on their channel, and check for new videos, because no matter what, they're like blacklisted. Like, it's crazy. You have to search and go down like 20 pages to find them on a video that has like 2 million views. It doesn't make any sense. So just FYI. Leslie, thank you for the 15 pounds. I appreciate that. Just a wee thank you for you three for the entertainment. Oh, thank you, Leslie. Leslie's been around for a long time.
50 Canadian bucks.
It is, man. Rich. NFG Nader, thank you for the $10. Shoe Nice, thank you for becoming a member again. He said he had to update his banking information. If you guys don't know Shoe Nice, check him out. He's a human goat. Literally, he can eat anything. And I mean like anything. The dude like literally ate like a roll of toilet paper in a video before. So yeah, he literally just like in alcohol, he can drink like a whole freaking like quart of vodka and not die. So
crazy.
He's magic.
I can drink it, I would just die.
he's a magical man. Jean Nicholas, thank you for the $3 Canadian. Look at that. Hey, bringing in that Canadian dollars. Said a little donation to David only just because. Okay, David, I owe you $3 Canadian.
We'll put it in the mail.
Add it to the ledger, man. We'll go ahead and I'll convert it to American and send you like 2 quarters.
Nice. The postage will probably $3 right there.
Oh no! Yeah. Somebody said Shoe Nice stopped drinking. No, although it probably saved his life. So I'm gonna say yes.
Probably good. What's a quart?
Yeah, no, I like Shoe Nice.
1/4 of a gallon.
Right.
It's a lot. It's for alcohol. It's a lot. Like I've seen him chug, and like I think I watched a video of him chugging a bottle of Tabasco. Like he literally took a whole bottle of Tabasco and like broke the little plastic thing off. I was like, gulp, 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 gulp. And you're like, how the hell is he not like having like a convulsion and gag reflex and like snot coming out of his nose? It's almost like his taste mechanism's like completely gone or something.
COVID.
It's crazy. You got to go watch it. You got to go watch it. It's a COVID thing.
You lose your sense of smell.
So we're going to see an uptick in Shoe Nice channels showing up on YouTube because of COVID.
He's going to have a lot of competition now.
I could totally see it. So moving on to one of the topics, because we do that every once in a while.
Oh yeah, topics.
Nvidia 3000 GPU versus RDNA 2. Are you going to wait and see what RDNA does, or are you just going to pull the trigger on that sweet, cheap, wonderful Nvidia?
I want the 3900 only because it's just ridiculous.
It is. What you get for $1,200 is good too. Like,
I mean, it's Titan power for $1,000 list.
Yeah,
do it.
Yeah, and it's 24 gig of RAM.
I don't know what I'd use it for, but I just say I have it.
And it supports NVLink, so later on when the price comes down, you can throw another 3090 in there and get your compute on.
Don't bother.
Really?
Yeah, the NVLink, SLI, the whole thing is dead.
For gaming, yes, but for compute, no. Like for
even still.
Oh, really?
Nope. You don't need it. It'll do memory sharing through the PCI bus, and it's just as fast. There's no.
Really?
Don, you have multiple cards. You don't have to link them.
2080, right? Don did some testing with the 2080 Ti's, the Titans and stuff, whether NVLink was going to make a difference, and it didn't. It was not a significant enough of a difference to warrant even the $45 cost for the bridge. It's not.
Well, if Don did that testing and came to that conclusion, I trust him 100%. That dude is like the nerdiest nerd of nerds. Like he's a king among nerds. The dude has like PhDs in like mathematics and physics and stuff. Like, isn't he like some crazy education?
I think his PhD is in theoretical chemistry, I think is what it is.
It's kind of a weird PhD
and mathematics. There's like mathematics and stuff involved.
Like chemistry wasn't confusing enough. You want to go theoretical with it.
Dude, I literally sat in a meeting with him once, and I think you were there, Houston, when I sat in the meeting that Don was like standing up talking about the flaws that were in the new generation of Intel processors, which is now like the last generation. But I remember sitting in a meeting where he was like talking about like some flaws and how he actually found them and how to exploit them and how they work. And he was talking about the benchmark that he ran, like ADA 64 or something like that, ADA. And I remember like just sitting there, and it's like, I'm a technical guy. I was even more of a technical guy back then. I was just sitting there and the shit was just flying over my head. I'm like, Don, what do you want about, bro? It's like he goes really, really deep on this stuff. And it's kind of cool that, a company that builds computers has the foresight to put somebody on staff that actually understands the processors at that level. So
that's what you're paying for, right? Surely that's exactly the kind of stuff you want to be. Like, that's why you're getting these systems, I'm assuming, is because they're tailored specifically for your needs, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, no, every computer that they built for me was specifically for, they asked me exactly what I was going to use it for, what software I was going to run on it, what the goal of the system was, what kind of environment it's going to be in. I mean, it's crazy. Like like my little HTPC that I have in my bedroom, it's like they literally built that thing to be like as powerful as it could be at the point in time that it will being air cooled and absolutely silent in a small form factor. It's like they took that all, they even did like the fan curves and stuff on it. Like when you guys do your testing in the noise room, they adjust all the fan curves so that they put in their own data. They've done their own testing with the case to figure out like what gives you optimal airflow, but without as much noise. And I'm like, that's really, really cool, the stuff that they do. And they'll even like laser cut inserts. Like this one has, actually they took them out when I did the new graphics cards. I took that out, but it had an airflow modification in it too. Cause like they'll do like little, plexiglass plates and stuff, and they'll engineer them to get the airflow through the case. Yeah. And it's crazy. So they use like FLIR and stuff to figure out how to get the optimal airflow, creating the least amount of turbulence and noise. It's crazy the depths that they go to.
Yeah, wow. I can tell you this new series of video cards has thrown quite a bit of a tizzy into things. I
mean, the power requirement on it's insane, right? Like, doesn't it take like a 10-pin connector or something?
Watts or something?
Yeah, it's more going to be that airflow, like because it's literally blowing hot air directly into your CPU cooler, and it'll be interesting.
So what do? Rip off the cooling and put in liquid cooling or something?
That might be a solution. We might have to go instead of from front to back, it might have to be like in from the front and back and exhaust out the top. There's options. We're gonna have to look into it once there's cards in hand. It's all speculation now.
When is it? 24th? The 20th? I can't remember what the.
There's
soonish though.
I think it's a rolling release, right? Like the 3090 comes out last. I think it's like 37, 3080, and 3090.
Yeah, something happens on the 17th.
They're doing the 90 first, though, aren't they? Isn't that the first one?
That's maybe I have it backwards.
So the 3080 is on the 17th, and then I think the 3090 is on the 24th.
Mm-hmm. Is anybody doing pre-orders for them yet?
Not that I've heard.
Yeah, because I haven't either. And it's like, I know with the 2080s and stuff, you could literally go on NVIDIA's site and like reserve a Founders Edition card and stuff. And I haven't seen none of that yet. So I think NVIDIA is literally going to just let all the first party guys release with them and just flood the market.
The 80 probably makes the most sense, honestly, for a nerd like me.
Really, that's the top end for what I would say enthusiast level. Yeah, you really don't need to be dropping $1,500 on a 3090 unless you're doing some sort of really high end sort of visual effects, rendering, or scientific computing. But
I think the 3080 has what, like 8,000 CUDA cores or something.
It's insane. It's like we're looking at, if their numbers can be believed, we're looking at basically double across the board.
How much memory did the 3080 have? Is it 12?
RAM?
Yeah, 11. It's 11 or 12, I think.
Looks like. Oh no, that's rumor from August.
Oh, it's 10 gig. Somebody said 10 gig in chat.
10 gig. It's not.
See, that's kind of why I want the 3090. Is not just because it's a big guy, but no, it's a lot. But like Flight Simulator actually can max out 12 gig.
Seriously?
Like Flight Simulator 2020 can consume 12 gigabytes and still have headroom to try to load more scenery. It is so freaking heavy.
And 3090 is 24.
That's the one thing that could drag Jane into PC use. Would be the Microsoft Flight Simulator.
She's so beautiful.
She's a big plane fan.
Dude, it is amazing.
She took many flight courses over the years.
It's the buggiest shit you've ever seen in your life, but when it works, it is just gorgeous. Like nothing. I mean, it literally looks like you're flying, like you're watching a video of you flying through the world. Huh. And I flew to my house. I flew and landed in front of my house and like pulled my plane into the driveway. Like that's how accurate the mapping is. And I mean, my house looks like a blob with like a bad texture on it, but it's like you can clearly tell it's my house. You can even see my car blob in the driveway. So it's like,
that's great.
It's so cool. It is so cool. I mean, and as long as you're a couple hundred feet away from the ground, it looks like perfect. It looks absolutely. Once you get down to the ground, then cars are like hovering around, and the trees look like blobs with a tree texture on them. But from like a couple hundred feet up, it looks absolutely amazing. The clouds look amazing. The lighting looks amazing. You would never believe it's not DirectX 12. It's amazing.
They're talking about tying in real-time weather as well, so you'll actually be able to fly through storms and stuff. Oh, they've done it already.
Yeah, as long as you're connected online and you have online mode enabled, you can see every other player that's playing the game basically in the world or whatever. I think they break them up into server groups. But you get to see everybody else that's flying in your world, and you get real-time weather. So the clouds aren't exactly, but the density, like whatever Doppler radar picks up, they try to replicate that in the cloud layers. And you even get the winds, the different direction of the winds in the different layers.
Yeah, even that would be cool.
It's insane.
Ha.
You can even fly, dude. All the flights are in there too. All the flight plans, like when Alaska flight goes up and flies around, that's all in the simulation in real time. So if you wanted to, and you knew somebody was doing a flight, you could like run home, and as soon as they take off, basically take off from the same runway and follow them to their destination and land behind them.
That is neat.
It's pretty wild what they've done. I mean, they really like set like GTA 5 literally changed like all gaming. Like GTA 5 having that open world sandbox with combined with the graphics and everything. I mean, even today people play. It's the most profitable game ever made. And so they changed that for now you got Flight Simulator, which doesn't just create like a bunch of cities packed together. It is the entire world. You can fly every place that there's a Bing map image, which is of like 90% of the planet. You literally have like photorealistic scenery that's streamed to you. So you could get in an airplane and fly all the way to the other side of the world and even see like the ships and the water and stuff, the ones that, their information is known and published. You can see the other airplanes flying through the air. You can see the weather exactly as it's supposed to be. Like when there was a hurricane, when that hurricane hit down in Texas, people were literally flying down to Texas and taking off and trying to fly through the hurricane. Because it was literally happening in real time, what was happening down there.
That is the only flying that I'm doing right now. I'm not getting on a plane.
I would not get on a real plane right now. That's why you need a simulator.
Yeah.
There you go.
And people flew to really weird places. Like you can fly to Area 51 and land on their incredibly long runway there. Somebody flew to Epstein's Island, and you can see like all the outbuildings and the shed and stuff. Like 100 people did a live stream where they all went to Epstein's Island and landed on it. And the funny thing is, his island is specifically not even put on the maps. Like Bing removed his island from the maps. But just if you go to Bing Maps, but if you fly in the flight simulator, it doesn't show up on your radar. But when you go out to that location, longitude and latitude, it is there. Because it was too hard for them to just remove the asset from the game because it's all streamed from the map data. So, it's not actually there on the maps, but it's physically there.
Yeah, like that's silly. Might as well just leave it there. Like, why bother?
I know, and it's
I don't understand why you would bother taking the effort to do it. Like, that's dumb,
dude.
It's like, we're gonna remove Cuba because we have embargo with them. They don't exist. Like, that's just dumb.
Yeah, because you can land on the White House, like next to the White House on the lawn, like the Rose Garden. You can land a Cessna in the Rose Garden at the White House.
And are you allowed to communicate with each other? Are there like, it's the social networking aspect as well to some extent? Yeah,
you can literally have your, like if you have your friend, you can have them switch to a radio frequency and actually talk to them in game on the radio frequency, just like they were in a real airplane.
Oh, that is very cool.
So, and there's even people that do, like there's an automated ground control system that basically communicates to you using just like text to speech. But there's also people on there that are just faking ground control. So like if you want, you can flip to a radio frequency, and there's like dudes that if you're for certain airports, they'll just sit there and direct traffic just in slew mode, like looking out, at everybody flying around like they're in the tower, and they're just pretending, and then you can just turn off the automated in-game stuff and have a real air traffic controller talk to you.
Wow.
So you can make it as real as you want, man.
I could see this really taking off.
Yeah, that's neat.
Literally, no pun intended.
That is a terrible pun. Terrible pun. If only I was meant to.
Hey, Pup, thank you for the $5 tip, man.
Fly around here.
I appreciate it.
Interesting, though. Wow, being able to fly. Yeah, that's just. Oh, all right,
dude. Anywhere you want, anywhere you want in the world, you can fly. And oh gosh, this is another cool thing. Some guy just figured this out on YouTube, and I'm surprised it took this long for them to figure it out, because once you see it, you're like, how the hell is this? So Microsoft didn't encrypt any of the asset files in Flight Simulator, and all the stuff that's sent to the server is based on your local coordinate system in game, because they want whatever's happening on your computer, they want that representative of the world. So some dude that I was watching online literally went in and modified a bunch of INI files for a Cessna to give it like 5 million horsepower and fly up to like 200,000 feet. And he's actually in the game with everybody else still playing on the server, just like buzzing by people at like Mach 6 in a Cessna. And it works. Like the online stuff is still there and the other planes are still flying around, but he's just like zipping by him like he's in a MiG and he's like in this little Cessna plane.
That's fun.
So hacking is running rampant, but it's not a game where you really like win or lose, and you basically just fly through the other person. So but you're not
crashing with other vehicles or anything.
Yeah, it's not crashing other vehicles, but it's still weird when you like get on a server and you're flying around and you see like a 747 doing like Mach 6 off in the distance, and there's like no way you can catch it just because it's some dude dicking around with his INI files.
Could you do this? So there's no way to do like dogfights or anything.
No. Oh, it's Gray Still Plays. That's right. That's the guy. Radioactive said, yeah, his channel's called Gray Still Plays, and he literally just every one of his videos is him trying to modify a game to do the most ridiculous thing you can do with it.
I think Baz watches him.
He's really funny. Like he goes in, he's like, oh, I wonder if Microsoft encrypted any of the files for the airplane. He like goes into the directory and it's like Cessna, and then he goes in another directory, it's like engine, and then he opens up an INI file and it's like, wow, it's all text. And there's even comments in the INI that tell you what every field means, like the pitch of the blades, the friction coefficient of the aircraft, how long the wings are, how long the propeller is it a jet, is it a rocket, is it like, there's all different classes of propulsion. So you can go in there and take the Cessna and like give it like 747 engines. It doesn't show in the graphic, obviously. But you can give it 747 engines and thousands of pounds of thrust, and you can give it so much thrust that when you start the game, even with the brake on the airplane, it just takes off into the sky and flies up like 200,000 feet. You can go up to where the curvature of the Earth, and you can see like the entire continent. It's crazy what you can do in that game. So highly recommend it if you can get it to work. It's like, it's one of those things where it's like, I usually play it for about 5 or 10 minutes and then it'll crash or it'll freeze up for a while. It's really unstable. Really unstable.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, I think I'll save my trash bag from that for the time being.
Oh, by the way, Conor McGregor just got arrested for sexual assault in Croatia, if you guys were wondering.
What?
Conor McGregor, the fighter.
That's super random.
The fighter guy?
Yeah. It just popped up. It just popped up on my screen. And I was like, I know who Conor McGregor is. Yeah, apparently he was arrested. He was just arrested 30 minutes ago. French media first reported the MMA star was arrested and released. So they arrested him and let him go. Okay, that's okay, for alleged attempted sexual assault and indecent exposure at a bar. Okay, well, Conor representing the Irish.
Corsica. Where is Corsica?
Get drunk and whip it out and run around. That seems like something Conor would do. Yeah, it just popped up in my trending tab.
Not Croatia.
Yeah. Oh, where is it?
Corsica.
Sorry, what did I said Croatia, didn't I?
I've been to Corsica.
I don't even know where Corsica is.
Oh, it's like off it's off Italy, right? It's that, isn't it?
Okay, that makes sense.
Napoleon was like banished there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's a mountainous Mediterranean island.
I still can't believe he lost, man. Like, come on. I lost $100 on that guy.
Bummer.
I thought he was gonna win, man. Dude's like MMA champion. He goes up against a boxer, Floyd Mayweather.
Oh yeah, but
like just decimated him.
It was a boxing match, because if McGregor was able to throw kicks and stuff, sure, but now flip it around, put Floyd Mayweather in an MMA ring and see what happens.
Yeah, that's true.
He's gonna get choked out.
Nah, you're right. Dude, I'll tell you what though, he got like the paydays that they got on that was crazy. I would fight if I got that.
400 million a piece or something. It was insane.
Yeah, I think Conor got I know it was over 300 million, and then Mayweather got almost $1 billion. Almost $1 billion for one fight.
Everybody on that fight.
Oh my God.
Come on.
I want to go on the record, if anybody's listening that's like a fight promoter or something, I will get in the ring with literally the Incredible Hulk. I don't care. I will get in the ring with a guy that is 3 times as heavy as me, all muscle, and his name is Killer. If you pay my medical bills and you give me $300 million, I will do it.
In the ring with Bonesaw.
I will do the Running Man for $300 million. You have to pay the medical bills though, because I'm pretty sure the medical bills would be over 300 million.
But that's a bunch of YouTubers have been doing that, haven't they? Was there like a bunch of these pretty boys?
KSI and Logan Paul, which now that was like a legitimate boxing fight.
That was
like Logan Paul actually took at least a year or more to genuinely train and get licensed as a boxer, and I think KSI did as well. That was a boxing match.
Hey, and credit where credit's due. I hate Logan Paul. I hate the Paul brothers with a passion. Literally with the capital H. I hate those fucking guys. But credit where credit's due. He really put up a good fight. Logan did a good job. I don't know anything
about boxing, but it looked like a legit fight. I watched it with Maple Syrup Mods. I was over his shoulder, and he's a boxing. He knows. I guess he's a big boxing fan, and he was like, "Dude, this is a legit fight. They're legit."
I was shocked. I really didn't expect Logan to do that well. I kind of thought it was he bulked up. He definitely got bigger. He put on a lot of muscle mass for that thing. He was
seriously trained for it. Yeah,
but the fight was good. His stamina was good. He hung in there. I mean, it was actually fairly close. So I was like, I thought for sure KSI was just going to steamroll his ass. I was like, oh, well, you're done. But, props where credit's due. I mean, he should just do more boxing. He's better at that than he is, causing all kinds of shit on YouTube and, going to,
I'd much rather watch people punch him.
Yeah. I mean, it's a win for everybody. He big payday for him. And, we all get to see him just get the shit kicked out of him. But
he could, box the Kardashians now that they're off the air.
That'd be hilarious.
In this quarter, you have Kim and Chloe versus Logan Paul. Oh, I'd pay for that shit. I would watch that.
That's funny.
And they get brass knuckles and chains. The
Kardashians, they get weapons. Yeah.
Whatever happened to Celebrity Deathmatch? You guys remember that?
Oh yeah, dude. Oh, I love that. Or what was the one? Epic Rap Battles of History.
Oh, that's still a thing for sure.
Wait, that's still around?
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I didn't know. I haven't watched it since like Stephen Hawking.
A TV series and failed miserably.
Oh, I did not know. Yeah, I'd say that. Yeah, that was the Celebrity Deathmatch was the TV series that went under. I'm talking about Epic Rap Battles of History, where they basically take like two people from history that are opposites and then have them rap battle each other.
Oh,
it's
hilarious. The problem is that all those really early successful big YouTube channels, they keep getting picked up and turned into TV series that never work. Like they never, funny. Ever. Like it doesn't make that transition. They're always like, how do we turn this into a TV show and make money off it? Nope.
Dude, we live in a crazy world, and you're proving it right now, David. Because if you asked me like a year ago, if like, would I be just like shooting the shit on TechTalk for 3 hours of fucking Rodney McKay from Stargate? That doesn't make any fucking sense in any reality other than like a COVID reality. It's like our worlds were forced together, my friend. Forced together.
But it's funny, like I used to do like PC Perspectives shows, and like it's just so nice to be able to talk tech. Like I mean, that literally, man, I'm like a walking pun. I'm just too tired. I automatically just slip into pun mode. But it's really fun to do this because when do you get? You guys may get to do this all the time. I don't. I have to talk about stupid films and stuff.
Well, stop being a little bitch.
You know, stop being. That's it.
That's what everybody tells me. Just stop being a little bitch.
I don't. In my normal day to day, I'm the nerd in my family, my girlfriend and the kids and stuff. Like, I'm the guy who like has all the weird esoteric knowledge. Like I know a little bit about a lot of things, and so it's really neat to have to share that with other people.
You still surprise me though, because like you're literally a walking anti-stereotype. Because it's like I look at you and it's like, you're a good looking guy in good shape, but you look like a lumberjack. You look like a guy that legitimately would always have an axe in his truck that's jacked up 6 feet off the ground. And it's like you drive a little hatchback sports car and you got your monster Harley beard but no motorcycle. Yeah. And you sit here and I can ask you anything. I can just be like, hey, can you explain in like 20 words like what fucking quantum mechanics is? Like what is quantum mechanics?
20 words? That would be hard. 20 words? But yeah.
All right, what is pi? Yeah. What is pi to the 4th decimal place?
3.14157. I don't.
Shit, extra credit.
I'm probably wrong. I mean, David helped me there.
Because I only know it to 3.14. Like you guys, you both got me beat.
3.1415. Look, Baz had a little song that he could do that would you could string it out for a while, but
Oh, it's a 9, not a 7. Oh, well.
That's all right. We'll still give it to you because you and David both got the last 4. I'm only 3.14 because let's be honest, nothing in my life is ever going to have precision that requires over 2/10. That's it. So,
isn't it like 965 or something? Something like that, isn't it? 14159 There you go.
65359. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why you'd need that in any way, shape, or form, but.
You know what's crazy is now, like, I remember back when the first computer computed pi to its last place. And it took like months, and it did it in my lifetime. And now like a GPU could probably do it in like seconds.
Does it actually end?
Yeah,
no,
it does.
No,
really?
It can't.
I thought it did.
So the idea, the reason why, and now this is where I get to come in with my
here we go
knowledge.
Please do.
The idea behind pi is that you are essentially taking like a circle, right, and trying to put edges on it. Like you're rasterizing the edge of the circle.
Yep.
And so you can potentially add an infinite number of sides to the circle, and the sides just get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. You get a finer fidelity of circle, but it's still rasterized in a way. And so the digits of pi will go on infinitely because you can add an infinite number of sides.
Constantly getting more and more definition in it.
Oh, because it's analog rather than digital, so it's just it's infinitely zoomable. Like
right, I'm sure there's some equation that defines a circle as a curve, right? Which I'm sure has a definition. But the reason a pi is a thing like that is because you're taking you're taking a circle, which is just like a curve, and trying to put sides on it.
Because the only thing I've ever used pi for in my life, other than eating furiously, the only thing I've ever used pi for is literally drawing circles and programming using the sine and cosine. Because you always, in the sine and cosine, you take it and multiply it or divide it by pi to get like the position of the pixel on the screen in a 2D plane. So that's the only thing I ever used it for. Now you don't even need it anymore, because now, like with graphics libraries and Unreal, you're like, oh, I want a circle. Oh, here, I'm just going to drag and drop this sumbitch and say I want it this wide. Oh, inches, millimeters, feet. Like I can define whatever I want, and it just figures it out for me. Oh, I want the camera. Like I remember camera positions too, because I once tried to make a demo when I was a kid, like Second Reality, and it was like a huge flop. All I did was make a camera that panned across the cube, and that was all. And I did all the code myself, but it was an insane amount of math to like figure out how to take that camera and do the perspective, because the camera isn't really moving. It's you projecting what the cube would look like if the camera was in that position.
Right.
So it's like, it's really bizarre. So the mathematics for it are literally like the cube is drawing, redraw the cube on the screen based on the viewport being here using the sine, cosine, and tangent. And I remember the math was incredibly slow. It was the most inefficient thing I ever wrote in my life. Got like 3 frames per second at like 320 by 200 because I was doing it wrong. But now you don't have to do that shit anymore. It's like, I wonder if there's any game developers out there that still do that level of math. Now, not engine developers, like the engine developers still have to do that, but like the game developers, like that used to fall on the game developer to figure out like the perspective of the camera and emulating a lens so that's not linear. You get that bloom effect, and you know, all that stuff is all like emulated now through like Unity or Unreal. But you as the game creator, it's like, do any of the game creators now that are in there writing the code, do they bother with any of that shit? Like, is that still important to know? I don't think it is.
Why would it be, really? I mean, it's like, it's just getting between you and the creation at this point, right?
Yeah. Well, why would you? Why would you do it manually like that?
I mean, it's like people driving cars, right? I mean, you don't need to. I mean, yes, it would be good to know how some of these things work, but the reality is we're just using it to get from one place to another, so we don't have to understand how it works. Whereas when you first had a Model T, you'd have to know how to fix it because there was no one who was going to fix it for you.
Exactly. Right. At that point, it's like, yeah, you had to know as much as the guy that built your internal combustion engine to like drive that thing anywhere and know you're getting home.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that's what's important is like as a software developer, that's one thing I try to like when I talk to people about programming, the first thing I tell them is you don't have to know the super low level stuff anymore. Like when I started programming back in the day in C and C++ and all I had was the ANSI standard library, it's like I didn't have functions in libraries. Back then there was no MFC and ATL, there was no Unity, there was none of these libraries. So it's like if you had to store something, you would create a linked list or a doubly linked list. And you would literally write the code that navigates that list in the most efficient way as possible, create different dimensions to it to optimize things. And now it's like, no, you just grab yourself a dictionary object that's already been optimized to the fucking moon. And regardless of what processor you have, it's runtime compiled if you're using a high level language like C# or Java. So you get the benefits of the processor. If the next processor has some new SSE extension that shaves, multiplication in half, you just benefit from that automatically. You don't have to go back in and like rewrite all your code to take advantage of that. And that's why I like abstracted languages. Like I used to be like really hardcore C++, and even did some assembly back in the day because there was a time where that was the only way you could really do graphics programming was through assembly because C just didn't have the capability built in yet. And so I remember back in those days, you had to do the really hard. I wrote a Visa library. You guys remember the Visa standard back in the day? Oh my
God, yeah.
So I wrote a Visa library. It was 65,000 lines of code to write my own Visa library to make my game 640, 480, 256 colors. Wow. Because otherwise, if I just programmed it for the Cirrus Logic card, then when I tried to play it on the Trident card, it would be all like mixed up because the memory was mapped differently. And I was writing directly to memory and DOS to the graphics card. Now it's like you don't have to worry about any of that shit. You're like, you know what? I don't have to know how much memory there is. I don't even have to know how the memory works. I don't have to know how the processor works. I don't know the big Indian, little Indian. I don't have to know the architecture, where its strengths, where its weaknesses are. I literally just say, I'm going to use this library. I want to draw this as fast as humanly possible, and I want it to look pretty and have all these effects around it. And then it figures out, does this system have a GPU? I'm going to utilize the GPU. Does this system have a processor with these extensions? I'm going to use those extensions. And it just automatically evolves with hardware, and you don't have to keep going in and like reconfiguring it. And I love that. I think that's people that try to focus. That's why I don't necessarily think that programmers need to go to school. Like I never did. And I became, a rock star dev at Microsoft for 15 years. I didn't have to go to school to learn how to code because the one thing that was common with everybody that went to school is they spent so much time learning these ultra low level things. Like, okay, I know how to go into assembly and like manipulate like, memory and use like bitwise operators to accelerate multiplication. And I'm like, show me one time in your entire Microsoft career as a test developer that you ever used any of that knowledge, even once. Mm-hmm. I had a guy once turn in a program where he used a linked list, and I'm like, are you shitting me? In C#, he created a linked list. I'm like, dude, there is a dictionary object. It is highly optimized. It has built-in memory management. It will... And the dude was like, well, but yeah, everything I learned in school is like linked list, and this is one that I created that's highly optimized. And I'm like, I don't care how optimized your linked list is. It is not as stable and not as performant as the freaking dictionary object that like Microsoft's dev team has worked on for like 8 years. Mm. Like, I didn't make him fix it though, because that was the rule. If it worked, you don't fix it. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That was a big thing at Microsoft.
But one of my concerns with the kids is that they keep getting told they have to learn how to code, and I'm like, in what? Learn to code in Scratch, because it's more about learning how to code, like how to think programmatically, than it is about actually the specific tools you're using. Because who knows in 5 years' time what tools will be available to them anyways.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
It's more important to have the concept and know how to create than it is to know the tools. Like, you don't have to know how the paintbrush works to make a good painting. You just have to have experience with the paintbrush. Right? It's like, you can swap out that paintbrush with 100 different paintbrushes, and it's going to change each painting a little bit, but ultimately the artist gets to adjust to the brush and make it do the best possible thing that they can make it do, right? And it's like, if the artist, if you hand them a better brush later, they're just going to do a better job, a better tool, right? So don't teach them how to create the brush, because if they know how to create the brush, the problem is they'll keep creating that brush over and over again because that's all they know.
And you'll bore the shit out of them.
Exactly.
That's the other problem. Exactly. Like, I remember like going into computer science and thinking this is going to be the best thing ever, and they handed me a bunch of freaking punch cards to program when there's a Mac. There's a little Mac Apple sitting on the windowsill that had just a clock on it, because that was a toy. You know what I mean? Basic wasn't really programming. You had to learn how to do punch card programming. The reality is that basic programming that was supposed to be for babies was far more valuable to me from a programming standpoint than any of the other stuff I learned in didn't learn in computer science. And I worry the same thing's happening to kids now, where they're being taught how to use these C languages basically. When they could just be using Scratch programming. I mean, just like, or Scratch-based programming.
It's like why I moved to C#. I moved to C# for like 99% of all the development I do. There's a rare occasion where I might like write a stub in C++ or something like that to use in C#. But the reason that I moved to C# is rapid development. I can create anything. Easy. The only exception is a kernel driver. That is the one thing I can't create yet. And I say yet because Microsoft is always working on making more managed driver support in the operating system. Like, you can already write a bunch of managed drivers. You just can't write a kernel driver in C#. So I can write anything in C# faster than you can in C++. I don't care what it is. I can do it faster in C#. And that's why I ultimately moved to C#. And it's because, like, I don't have to go through that. Memory management is the most tiresome thing in all of programming.
I've never understood it.
Yeah, anytime you go and learn a language at school, an entire semester of programming in school, they're going to cover memory management. And it's because you need to understand that memory is a finite resource. You need to understand that how you index the memory and how you use the memory affects the performance of the application, the performance of lookup, how it coexists with other applications, all this shit that they feed you, which was accurate back in the DOS days. But none of it makes any sense today with memory management built into the operating system, the .NET framework having a garbage collector. Memory optimization is in real time. So it's like, if I create a dictionary object and I use it in the most inefficient way humanly possible, that dictionary object is going to try to compensate as much as humanly possible. If I run out of memory, instead of just shitting the bed and blowing up my application, me have to write 500 lines of code to handle all the low memory conditions, I just let the dictionary object throw an exception that says, listen, I don't have enough memory right now. What do you want to do? Oh, I want to wait a little while and try that operation again. Maybe notify the user, instead of just shitting the bed and blowing up. And that's what I like about C#, is it's like you can do everything. An exception-driven model is so much easier to react to and build a stable program than a program that's literally just hitting syntax errors and blowing at stack or buffer overflowing or stack overflows. That's another big one. You don't ever really, I mean, you can technically do it, but you don't see a lot of stack overflows in C# because the stack is virtual. As long as you got memory in the computer, it will expand the stack. But in C and C++, you have a hard limit on the stack. So if you have a function recurse too many times, you will blow the stack in your computer, and the app has to crash you. In C#, you don't have to do that. Just keep adding shit onto the stack. I mean, it's irresponsible as fuck, but add as much stuff onto your stack and let the language deal with it. And then when the computer runs out of memory, you can still prevent the application from crashing and just have a holding pattern until more memory becomes available. So for stability and performance, like C# is absolutely amazing now. It wasn't when it first started, but That's why I always recommend people are like, what language should I start with? I'm like, well, I personally like C syntax. You may not. But using languages like C# and Python and like you were saying, was it Scratch? You know, these high level languages. Apple even has one. What's the Apple one called? The one where it's like basically like drag and drop. It's like Visual Basic.
Yeah.
What's it called? Does anybody know? It's like Switch or something like that. What's the Apple language for like? Swift. That's what it is. Swift. So all of these languages are hugely abstracted but massively powerful. So
because you get where you want to go.
Exactly.
You don't have to. You're not reinventing the wheel every time.
Yeah, and the thing is, like before I had Adderall, yeah, I could sit in a room with no distractions for like 24 hours and write a Visa library. But now I can't. Like, there's too many distractions in life and shit's moving too fast. So it's like, if I want to write something, I find the language that makes it the most efficient. Like Unity, for instance, I wrote a game. I wrote RC Pro-Am in Unity in 3 hours. Like, it wasn't an exact, but it was basically the same game. Looking at like a parallax 2.5D, driving a car around, and I literally just grabbed like PNG images off of Google and extruded them based on their color depth and created a little extrusion map. And it just did everything for me. And I'm basically like, here's a plane, here's the car, give it gravity on this axis that's this much, give the tires, each tire object its own grip. Like, you know, like how much it grips the surface. And I just enter in all this shit as numbers. I don't have to do anything. And it's like, I think I wrote maybe 100 lines of code. The rest of it was all drag and drop. And I had like RC Pro-Am and I could do laps.
I think that's a huge benefit of object-oriented programming is like now we've gotten to a point early on. So like C# was brand new when I was first dabbling into computer science. And we've come, what is that? 16 years since I graduated.
You old fuck.
And but the
don't
thing is with object-oriented programming is the whole idea was that you could just make these objects, these little blocks of code that can just plug in and anywhere. All you have to do is call them and give them the right, fill in the right variable blanks. And it just works. It spits out whatever it is you needed to do. And you don't have to keep rewriting stuff over and over and over. And it's evolved in the last 15, 16 years that where basically anything you want to try and accomplish has probably already been done. Or you can piece together these different blocks, these different objects to accomplish. You want physics to work? There's a block for that. There's already an object that will work. And it's been done. And that's super cool. I think at a certain point it becomes optimization, like memory optimization or just code optimization so that things flow appropriately. Because you can be super lazy and it'll work, but it's not the best. You'll get memory leaks. You still see it in AAA games even because they are just basically using these Lego blocks to make something come together. And when they don't line up quite right, you get weird bugs and crashes and stuff.
And you
get privacy issues too, right? Where you've got where people are importing all these libraries they may not need or even know that they're using.
Yeah.
Somebody said object-oriented programming scared them off from programming. It is a weird concept when you learn procedural first.
Man, it was so liberating to not have to go from one action to another to have it be able to spread out and do different things. Multi-threading was weird. I couldn't really wrap my head around two or three threads at a time.
That's the hardest concept for anybody to get in programming. And that was actually my specialty. That's the thing I'm most comfortable doing my entire career at Microsoft I was the multi-threaded go-to guy.
It's the timing. The timing. You have to, and that's where optimization comes in. It's like you have to know that this thread is going to finish before I need that answer.
You can literally make a program slower by multi-threading it if you don't know what you're doing. That's the thing is a lot of people think that just like creating a thread pool and throwing work at it that you're going to get like some magically faster application. It's like, no, if thread 1 is holding up on thread 2, you can actually eat more resources and slow the process down versus just putting them in a FIFO queue and just processing them. So
it reminds me of multi-camera filming.
Yeah,
where everyone thinks that the more cameras you've got, the faster you're going to go and get things shot. But the reality is, you spend more time trying to figure out how not to get those other cameras shot.
My favorite thing of object-oriented programming, though, is debugging. Object-oriented programming makes debugging easy. So if something happens in your program, it's always going to be traced to an object, and then within the scope of that object, the problem is somewhere in there. So whereas with procedural programming, as we like to call it these days, spaghetti code, just write a bunch of shit and return.
That's what I used to do.
Dude, didn't we all? So, as a matter of fact, I wrote a Pong game once. It was 10,000 lines in a main statement. I never wrote a single function. It was just main, and the entire thing was just in line. And but I can tell you, right, because it was basically a world loop, right? In a game, you have a world loop. It just cycles. That's the traditional way to do things. That's why most games aren't multi-threaded until now, where we're going out and we have more threads. Now they're figuring out that, wait a second, we should figure out how to logically break up the workload, have a bunch of threads, create their little queues of things, and then have one main world loop that brings it all together and implements it in a frame buffer. Which is kind of like what Unity does. Like Unity, if you create a bunch of 3D objects, it'll naturally multi-thread it and be like, oh, this object can be rendered by this thread, this object can be rendered by this thread, this object can be rendered by this thread, and then once they're all done rendering, they can come back into the queue and the world loop can pull them and render a frame and put it on the screen. And that way you're not just waiting for object 1 to render, object 2 to render, object 3 to render, you're doing them all in parallel, and then when the slowest one is done rendering, you trigger it, the frame buffer fires and updates the screen, and then you have a variable frame rate. So multi-threaded programming is like super powerful if you know how to use it, but people will just create a thread pool and chuck shit at it and expect it to be faster, and it's not always the case. It'll actually slow things down.
Will it eventually handle that stuff for you, do you think? I mean, eventually will that stuff get automated as well?
It already is.
Probably.
I haven't played around with the .NET framework since like 4.0. I think it's up to like 4.5 now or something like that. And they already optimized the thread pool to have a lot of the internal objects for C# now have auto locks inside of them. So like semaphores and mutexes and stuff like that, they're just internally locked. So where you used to write a program where the thread would process and just like crank out, now if you're pulling something out of a dictionary or something like that, you can literally have the thread pool automatically pause your thread until thread B is done processing and triggers it. And it'll do it internally for a lot, not everything. Like if you create your own objects, you still have to put your own locks in them. But a lot of the stuff's auto-locking now, so you can just create a function and say, I want to do this in the thread. I want to do this 100 times at the same time, throw it in the thread pool, and in many situations, it'll do it the best way it can. It may not be perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than before, where it would just run everything and you'd hit race conditions and lock shit up. Because a race condition is like when one thing gets ahead of what the thread is waiting for, and now the thread is waiting for a state that can never happen because thread 1 outran thread 2. And then you end up locking the program up for eternity because you can never meet the state because you overshot it. Right. So in multi-threaded programming, you always want to make sure every thread is doing a different piece of work without needing write access to the same object. So if you have a thread, if you're saying like I have a thread that wants to figure out every phone number in the phone book, right? What you would do is give each thread a range of numbers that it would generate and call and test, right? And instead of just throwing it into a pool and saying, oh, hand each thread a number, because you could hit a race condition where you don't properly lock it out while you're pulling the number, and then 2 of the threads get the number at the same time. And then both of them try to process the number, and if only one of them is successful and the other one fails, then you have a problem. So what you want to do is create a thread that goes through and breaks apart all the phone number ranges, and then that thread creates pools that contain the pools of the different numbers that you want to process, and then each one of those pools will go through and process that workload. And that way you're not creating a new thread every single time to process one phone number, which would have a lot of overhead and be very expensive and inefficient. But instead you're spawning, n number of threads depending on how many cores your processor has, and then giving a queue to each one of those threads to process. So that way you're maxing out everything at 100%. You're not creating ridiculous amounts of overhead by just creating a new thread every time you want to do like one tiny little bit of work, or like multiplication, for instance.
That's an interesting point, though. If you've got multiple cores that you're programming to, then you still have to know how many cores you're dealing with then.
Correct.
Because there's no way to optimize for like 64 cores if you've got an 8-core PC or whatever, right? I mean,
exactly.
Oh, wow. So
you literally query the computer is what you do. Like you look at the computer and you say how many physical cores are available, and you can even go as deep to say which ones are hyperthreads and which ones aren't, because sometimes if you farm work out to the hyperthreading, it'll go slower than it does on the conventional cores. So again, you can create weird race conditions. So you basically figure out like what the platform you're on, because if you don't, then it's going to just do it on its own. Like for instance, if you create a thread pool, and you say thread pool, go do a whole bunch of work, and you tell it to do it in parallel, it's going to automatically make a decision of how many threads it creates based on the optimization of like what resources you have, your CPU, your memory. It's going to make that decision on your behalf unless you tell it exactly what you want it to do. So it's still going to try.
It's better not to be specific. It's better to be general with this stuff.
Exactly. Then if a processor comes out, it's got 128 cores. Now your program's screaming, but you got to make sure that your program knows that there could be a situation where there's so many cores so that it doesn't overdo it and then become slower. So if it's faster to create 8 threads and just run them in a queue, like in a line, because it's more efficient than creating a thread and destroying it each time. Because this is actually a cool experiment. If any of you guys out there are programmers, open up C#, create a thread pool, feed it a function that just has one line. All it does is just add the number 1 to a variable. It can even be a local. It doesn't even have to be, add a 1 to a variable, and watch how long it takes that damn thing to run, like say 10,000 operations. Now just create a single thread that just loops a while true and adds 1 to the variable, and compare the times at which they run, because there is a massive amount of overhead with creating a thread, because you basically have to tell the operating system to create a thread, which is a shitload of assembly code that runs at the CPU level. Then you're giving it a workload that is literally just like move AH to whatever register, and then add 1 to it. So it's 2 lines of assembly. And then it's running a shitload of code to garbage collect and tear down the thread and destroy it. So if you do that for every single number that you're adding, you're literally 99% of the workload is literally just creating the thread to do the work, and 1% is the work. So it's like literally sending like 100 people out to like nail 1 board to a building. It doesn't make sense. But if you send 10 people out to nail 100 boards to the building, and each person nails 10 boards to the building, then you can actually find this sweet spot where you're optimizing it. So now the work that you're doing is actually benefiting from having multiple threads, but you didn't create so many damn threads that overwhelmed everything. So it starts that's where threading starts getting really confusing to people. But you have to look, and object-oriented programming is what kind of fixes the threading issue, because you can do threading in procedural programming, but with objects, you basically have the objects have events, and the events in the object basically say what the state of the object is at any given time. So what you do is you just create an object that says, okay, this object does nothing but just add 2 numbers together. And then I create a thread and I feed it my object and say, okay, I want you to run this object with these 2 input variables, and each thread gets different variables, right? So it does the work. But then internally to that object, I tell that object how it does the work, how it builds itself, how it destroys itself, and I just optimize the ever-living shit out of it. And then each time I hand that object a thread, each object knows exactly how to build itself in the most efficient way to get the work done. It carries out the work, and then if an error happens or something, it has exception handling in it that will try to handle it, and then if it can't handle it, it'll throw the exception out even further up the stack, and then you can handle it upstream. So there's like different levels, like there's local exceptions, then there's global exceptions, but it allows, object-oriented programming allows you basically safety nets at multiple levels, whereas procedural programming doesn't. So you can have a million threads running, and if threads just start shitting the bed left and right and they can't do that, like you gave them a bad number out of range, you have them throw an exception. Instead of tearing the program down, you just capture that exception and log it somewhere and let the program finish its work. So now you can go back to the log.
Whereas procedural, you'd basically just hit a wall.
You'd hit a wall, get a syntax error, a memory overflow, or a buffer overflow, or stack overflow. You'd get like some level of crashing error, which in object-oriented programming, the only time you get an error that's considered a catastrophic failure, not an exception, the only way you're going to get that in C# is if you completely overwhelm the CPU and the memory in the system, and it literally doesn't even have enough memory to continue running the stack that's already loaded. Like it has to be so compromised that it doesn't even have enough memory to run your little piece of code that's saying wait for more memory. And even that's really hard to hit, because chances are that's already been pre-allocated, because that was a part of your constructor or your deconstructor, your 2 functions that basically build an object and tear it down that you get to define as the developer. You basically can define in those things all kinds of conditions that'll reserve that memory and make sure that it's there. So even if the computer completely runs out of memory, there's no way for it to create an object without having that memory first. And then you prevented yourself from having a catastrophic failure. So there is still like nuance to writing a stable application, but in C# it's like a no-brainer compared to like in procedural code. I have to say, okay, call, and this is going to date me really bad because this is like old C, right? So call malloc, right? Call malloc and allocate some memory. Go ahead and allocate that to a pointer. Now put something in that memory. Now loop through and allocate another block of memory. Oh shit, that memory is not available. Okay, catastrophic return it'll return a value saying I didn't get the memory, and I have to add the code saying check that value, and if I didn't get the memory, then run it again and run it again, wait some time, run it again. I have to write all the code that does that. Whereas in C# being a managed object-oriented language, all I have to say is I want a new object, give me a new object, and if it fails to give me the new object, it can actually either throw an exception saying that it didn't have enough memory, which I can just catch somewhere in my code and try again, or it'll just handle it internally for a number of iterations until it fails, and then it'll kick out the exception. So I give the object, the object can basically try to work out its own problem for it without you intervening at all. And some objects will do that. Some objects you can pass the thing to, it says literally just try this operation indefinitely, like a TCP connection or something. I want to connect to this port on this IP address. I want to set the timeout to infinite, and I want you to literally sit there and do absolutely jack shit until you make that connection by any means possible. Whereas the C++ equivalent would be try to connect to the port, allocate a variable or a class memory so that you can feed that information back from the API that says whether the connection was successful or not. Then I'd have to check that to see if the connection was successful. If it wasn't, then I'd have to create a loop around that or whatever to call and start it all over again, release the memory, reallocate the memory to that object, override it again, calling the API again. And I'd have to create all the code to do that. Whereas in C# I can literally just say object equals new object. And internally, that's all handled for me. The memory allocation, any potential failures that may happen that can be handled internally will be handled internally. If it's something that it didn't expect, it'll throw it out to me, and I can just put a try block around it. It's like, try to give me this object. If you fail, tell me what exception was thrown so I can decide whether I want to like log it and exit the application, or if I want to just keep trying again because it was like connection timeout. If I get a connection timeout exception, then I just keep retrying, right? Whereas I don't get that level of granularity from C and C++, because all I'm going to get is an int returned to me with a number, and I'm going to have to compare that number to a bunch of constant values in some error header file that says, connection underscore timeout, or does this equal connection underscore this, or connection. I have to test each condition individually. So you have to be very specific. In C and C++, you have to be very, very intentional. Every single thing you do, every byte of memory allocated, everything is very, very intentional. Whereas in C#, you don't have to worry about that so much. You don't have to make the paint that you're painting the house with. You just have to point the gun and spray it. And I like that. I like that mentality of programming.
I always thought I always thought that I was cheating by not knowing that stuff.
No,
so I always felt like I had to do C, or I had to do assembler or assembly. I never know which we're supposed to say, but
assembly.
Assembly.
I mean, see, what's so funny is I'm fascinated by that, but I know it would be an absolute. I mean, talk about something I would have a hard time getting my head around. But I love I did do one course on C#, and I loved it. But I felt like I was cheating, so that's great. I could just concentrate on that if I want to do some programming.
Yeah, C#'s awesome because exception-based handling is fantastic.
Oh,
it is.
That is so awesome.
Because you can literally, and the other thing too is exceptions use something called interfaces. Well, everything does. Objects use these things called interfaces, which is like a contract. And a class or an object can have multiple interfaces. So I can create an object that has like 20 interfaces, which means that one object can basically be cast to 20 different types. And what that allows me to do now is if I have an exception that's a high-level exception, I can have that exception derived from like 20 different interfaces, and now I can look into that one exception if it's thrown, and I can cast it into any one of those other types depending on the situation that I'm expecting may occur, and I can handle it and try again or change my variables. Oh, it didn't connect to that port and it threw an exception. There was nothing there. Okay, add another one to the port number and try again. Add another port to the one number and try again until you get a successful result. And you can keep going through without having to write a bunch of maintenance code. And I love it. And as a matter of fact, like one of the worst things you can do, and I saw this all the time at Microsoft doing code reviews, and I'll even admit I did it myself once because I had 15 minutes literally to fix a production code problem, and I couldn't. There was no feasible way for me to debug the thing and fix it in 15 minutes for it to hit production before all the computers came and hit the service. So I did the ultimate sin. I opened it up, open main, try, go all the way to the end, catch all. If this fails, pop main back onto the stack again. Basically, I recursed main. And I put a timeout. So I'd like wait a couple seconds, do it again. Wait a couple seconds, do it again. Because we kept hitting a condition where one of the threads created by a machine connecting through TCP it was this random issue that would just cause the program to throw an unhandled exception. And the exception would be some universal exception that didn't mean anything. It was literally a bug in the framework somewhere. So I was like, I can't fix this, and it only happens every once in a while. It's not a constant thing. So instead of having the program shit the bed because this random unhandled exception could mean anything, I just catch it throughout the entire main statement of the program, and no matter what happens, I just go back and call main again. So it's an uncrashable program. I basically created a program that is incapable of crashing without consuming every single resource on the stack.
So it just keeps restarting itself whenever
basically,
it needs to.
yeah, it's self-healing. And it's really, there's a lot of reasons why it's really bad to do that. Not only is it poor practice, it makes debugging a nightmare, and it creates problems, but it allowed me to quickly get the program working so that everybody could hit it with the telemetry and upload to the database. Well, I could then simultaneously debug it and find the real problem and fix it, because I couldn't do it in 15 minutes. It was literally, I was racing a clock because a whole lab was installing, and we knew the installs would be done in about 15 minutes. And as soon as the installs are done, all the computers start calling home through this service into the database. And if the service isn't running, they all time out and they all fail and they won't continue with their test run. So in order to get them to continue with their test run, I literally just went in there and just said, try, catch, I don't give a shit. Just run this thing and loop the shit out of it. If it fails a connection, then go ahead and just destroy it and let it try to connect again, because it would try to connect multiple times. And so... And the irony was, I literally took like a week to find the bug because it was really deep and it was a framework bug. It wasn't my bug. I literally had to get the .NET framework guys to issue a patch, which took forever. So that literally remained in production for like weeks. like I literally had a service running in production that was basically just try, catch all, repeat. And
without looking for what the reason was.
Didn't even have to know.
Basically,
Yeah, didn't even have to know shit. The only thing that I was doing right there is I was saying, if anything happens, I don't care what it is. It could literally be memory allocation failed to connect, couldn't find a network card in the computer, couldn't access WMI, wrong user account, wrong access level. It could be anything. And I was like, you know what? It's
just going to go back and start again.
Exactly. I know it works 99% of the time. So anytime it fails, I'm just going to have it just rinse and repeat.
Wow, so that's really dangerous in a way then, because you could, from a hacking perspective, basically you could just inject whatever you want. The system's just going to go, okay.
Well, actually, no matter what you inject, as long as it crashes and throws an exception, you would basically just repeat again. But,
I see. So
but what makes it dangerous is, let's say now it starts failing at a high rate. So now what you do is you consume all the resources on that server, which now kills every other service running on that server. Because I'm not alone. The server has like 100 services running on it, and I'm sharing it with other people. This is actually an infrastructure server in production. So if I fuck up and it just starts like, I'm taking a calculated risk, because if it only crashes once out of 90 times, it throws the exception and then restarts itself, then I'm fine. But if it does that 100,000 times in an hour, it could stack overflow and literally consume all the resources on the system and like blow up a bunch of other services, and then they're going to come hunting me down. But I had a high degree of confidence.
That was out there.
Yeah, but I had a high degree of confidence that it happened. So, I mean, it was literally like the program would crash after like 6 hours of thousands of computers hitting it constantly. So I knew that there was just this weird transient thing that was happening. And it ended up being a .NET framework bug in TCP, like connecting over the network. There was a condition where if a computer connected to it over the network, it would tell it that the connection was established when it wasn't quite established yet. And then if something tried to hit that object after it said that it was connected and it was ready to go, the object would report that it wasn't connected. But it was a weird, like, transient, only happened like 1 in a million times. That's why it took so long to debug, is I had to reproduce it in an environment where I could see exactly what it was doing, and then have something called an RDNA trace going back to show all the previous operations that happened on the stack, so that I could tell the developer, listen, the object clearly reported back to me that it was connected, and then the very next frame where I access the object, it says it's not connected. But then if you step it one more line of code, all of a sudden the object's connected again. So there's some weird threading transient thing happening in there where the object is still connecting after it's returned to me and said it's ready to use. And that only, and it was a timing issue.
It was ready to go when it wasn't quite ready yet.
Yeah, but it would be ready. It would become ready. So what we ultimately did is the short-term fix, because it was a .NET framework patch that was needed. But the short-term fix that I did about a week later after running this thing in production is I just went in there and basically just put a try block around that one piece of code to access the object. And if it threw an exception saying not connected, all I would do is just keep looping through until the object reported it was connected for about 2 minutes. And if it didn't become ready within 2 minutes, then I would just garbage collect it and throw the thread out and let the program continue. So that it could try to establish the connection again. And that ended up, like, the patch was fine. I don't even think we ever pulled the patch, because even when they fixed the issue, the code, there was no reason to pull it out, because as long as it got a connection like it was supposed to, it would never actually go into the exception handling code in the first place. So it was basically a dead code path, and we just left it alone.
Right.
But yeah,
there must be a ton of those in Windows by now.
Dude, if you saw the Microsoft source code, you would cringe so hard. Oh my god, dude. Like my biggest so Microsoft stories, when I started working at Microsoft, and if you watch my life story, you can get the whole thing. But in a nutshell, I basically started as a hardware guy. My job was to replace like hard drives and power supplies and rack mount servers and put them back up on shelves and stuff. That's what I did. And I ended up automating my job and creating programs that told me when servers went offline by just pinging everything. I just had a big Sony Trinitron monitor at the front of the lab, and I'd walk in the morning, and everything that was red was something that I didn't get a ping back from. So that I could just go down the aisles, pull the computers, and my job was automated. Because my job was literally to go down with a clipboard and check all these computers and be like, are you online? Are you online one by one through KVM switches? And I was like,
they were doing that manually?
They were doing that manually even before I got there. So I created this automation that monitored the whole lab. And that was when my boss was like, wow, you can code? And I was like, he's like, why didn't you put that on your resume? I was like, well, I was never formally trained. It's just something that I do as a hobby. And he's like, well, what else can we automate around here? And that started my whole path towards automation, ultimately got me my full-time job 8 months later. But I created this thing that basically like automated the lab, right? Would find all these computers, when they were down, I could go fix them. And I evolved my job through writing all this automation that was all C++. This was all before the .NET framework. So this code was very leaky. I'd have to restart the service every week or whatever, because it'd consume like 8 gigabytes of memory on the server, which back then like 8 gigs of memory was like $100,000. So yeah, I'd have to reboot the server and stuff. So there was a lot. So I had to go through and like write a bunch of code to fix it up. Well, I'm like, man, this is spaghetti code. I did my first code review with a guy named Tim Flynn at Microsoft. Hopefully he's watching this. Tim Flynn does my first code review, and he's looking through and he's just marking it up with a pen like crazy. Because I'm not even a developer at this point. I'm just a hardware guy, and my boss wants me to do a code review because he's basically trying to see if I'm up to the challenge of becoming a developer, transitioning from hardware to software. Right. And so he puts me in this, and I'm nervous as fuck because this Tim Flynn guy, he's got, you can tell he's got a lot of confidence. He's a career developer, and I'm like, oh my god, how did I get myself in this situation? He's marking up my sheet of paper, red. Oh, this is wrong, and he comes in with like, a stack of paper. It's like this thick, and he literally went through the whole program. The entire program I wrote, probably, maybe 1,200, 1,500 lines of code. He goes through the whole thing and he marks it all up, and he comes back and sits down the code review and just grills me for like an hour of sitting down eating lunch. He's just like, this is wrong, this is why you don't do this. This is bad practice. This is practice. And at the very end, you know what he told me? Don't change a thing. he said, don't change a thing. All I want you to do is apply this knowledge in your next project. He's like,
so don't mess with it.
He's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He's like, that's the number one thing we don't do here at Microsoft is it ain't broke, don't fix it, because every time you touch that code is another opportunity to introduce a new bug that could be worse than the one that you're trying to fix or the thing you're trying to optimize. So I was like, okay, well, that's a little weird. So I walked away from that, first feeling completely emasculated. And then I'm like, oh, okay, don't touch it. It works great. And he even liked the program and he thought the idea was sound. So I started writing other programs and implementing that. Now I start looking at the source code. They give me source code access at that point, which I'm not supposed to have because I'm a CSG contingent staffer. So I'm not supposed to have source code access, but they massage some things and they get me access to the source code. And so I start looking through the source code because they want to see if I can, use blocks of code that Microsoft has already written to automate more things in the lab. Like it would be easier for me to automate something if I knew the API and how it worked in the internal stuff. So I started going through the code and holy shit was I just like immediately relieved. It like being a shitty developer was okay because like production code that was shipping to the user in Windows had like comments and stuff on it, like, literally, fuck you, manager, haha, I didn't have to fix this, look, I didn't do what you said and it still works. And then the guy under that would be like, comment added or whatever, oh no, fuck you, dude, or whatever, I still was right and you were wrong. Okay, // no, fuck you, dude. And then like another guy would randomly put and there's checking in these comments, having like IRC conversations in the code. Nice. It was the weirdest shit ever. And they would do stuff like rename variables. Like there was literally, we had to do a whole sweep. In the first like 3 years I was there, I think it was Windows Server 2003, we had to do a sweep because government wanted access to the source code. This is when the US government said, for us to use this, we need access to the source code. So Microsoft's like scrambling, like, oh shit, we got to go through and find all these bad comments and all this offensive variables and shit and remove it. Because upon a code review, this is going to reflect poorly on us. And not only was the United States, they had to show the source code to China and to 2 other countries. It was China and 2 other countries that requested government source code access because they use Microsoft software for government and military operations. So they need to have the source code. And so like we found out that in China, the word red is offensive. Like you can't use the word red. So every place in the source code where there was a comment that said red, like the color, you had to actually go in and replace it with like an RGB value in the comments. And if the variable was named red, you had to change the variable name because red was offensive. And there was a couple other words and we used a software called
red offensive?
What's that?
Why is red offensive?
I never even looked. I don't even know why. Maybe somebody in chat could explain. Why is the word red considered offensive?
Is it like a communist thing or something? Or?
I mean, maybe it is because I know it was red was one of them. They had to remove all profanity, so all the fucks and shits, and there was about 10 million of those in the source code. So this prefast and prefix program ran through the source code and it would open a bug every time it saw a comment that was bad because it can't just remove it itself because that would fuck it up. So what it does is it opens a bug against the developer that owns that piece of code and says you need to go in and fix it. Well, they ran the prefast system and it opened like 100,000 bugs. And the developers are like how do we even go through this and approach it? And because like, how do you go through 100,000 bugs and each bug is like, oh, this word needs to be removed. This word needs to be changed. This violated this rule. This violated this rule. And it was all syntactical stuff. It was nothing that meant anything useful to the code and how it worked. And so it was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare. We spent like 2 years like massaging the source code and getting everything cleaned up. But I missed the comments. Like, I wish I had a snapshot of what the code looked like before they did the prefast run, because you could open up any file. It didn't matter. You could open vga.sys. You could just open vga.cpp and start scrolling through it. And there would just be shitloads of comments of developers shitting on each other, telling each other how wrong they were and how they implemented. So, oh, the way I'm doing this is so much smarter than this dipshit over here did this piece of code. And he'd list the source file in the comment and the line number just to shit on his coworker. It was, dude, it was weird. It was weird. One of the funniest comments I ever saw, though, was I opened up Xcopy. So the source code for Xcopy in the command prompt, I opened up because I wanted to see how it was doing the file copy to see if it was more efficient than what I was doing. which was like create a file handle, copy a certain amount of stuff into memory, dump it to the file, copy another block, dump it to the file. It was very inefficient the way I was doing it. So I look at Xcopy, and at the very top of the file, there's like a 20 comment section at the very top of the file that's like, hey, did you hear so-and-so just got a Ferrari? I didn't know that guy got made enough money to buy a Ferrari. I bet you that guy stole it. And it was like this whole conversation that was like 20 lines, and at the very end, it ended with the manager that would say, would you guy please shut the fuck up in the source code? It said, please shut the fuck up in the source code. P.S. I want to ride in your Ferrari. And it was like, I was just beside myself. I was like, oh my God, this is Microsoft shipping source code. And these are the comments that if you have the private symbols, these show up in the symbols. So if you're debugging with private symbols and something crashes where that comment is, you can actually go look at that comment with the symbol. And Microsoft leaked internal symbols back then all the time. So I'm sure there was companies like Ford and stuff that were going through debugging bugs and just seeing these really fucking crazy conversations between developers.
That's wild, though. I hadn't even thought of that. Because I mean, you do like when you're coding, you do write shit like in there.
Oh hell yeah,
you do. So I actually felt fine being a developer. Like when I became a developer, I was really self-conscious that, oh my God, you got to be professional and do everything by the book. And granted, as time went on, it got more and more like that. But the first like 10 years I was at the company, it was the wild, wild west, man. Until like Jim Alchin checked out and Brian Valentine left and Steve Ballmer left, and those guys were all pushed out. It was a completely different company. It was the wild, wild west. You could just say anything. Like people were making variables. Like we had a guy that we had to actually tear into pretty good because he was making it hard to debug shit. Like you'd literally debug his code and all the local variable names would be female celebrities.
Oh,
like you didn't even know what they were. The variable names are supposed to reflect what they're doing. Like, like a loop counter, right? Like count would be the name of the variable. Like, just lowercase c count. And you'd be like, okay, well, that's the count for the loop, and it's a local. But no, he'd name it like Gwyneth Paltrow, or Amanda Tapping, for instance. And you'd be like, what the fuck do these variables do? You'd be debugging it, and you'd have to literally go line by line through the code to figure out, is Amanda Tapping the counter, or is Amanda Tapping the buffer for the API they're calling?
Is this job security? I mean, is he just trying to make it difficult for other people to fix it?
I almost think like there is an element of that, but I think it's more that Microsoft developers had a chip on their shoulder, and they thought that they could just do anything. And the truth is, for a long time, they could. Like I witnessed that developers were the most arrogant out of everybody. Actually, program managers were probably the most arrogant, but developers were a close second to program managers, like with their arrogance. Like they thought that they were bulletproof. They only changed code when they wanted. If they thought your bug was beneath them and they didn't want to fix it, they just wouldn't. And you had very little power to force their hands. Like I've even told some stories on here about things that I had to do to force the hands to fix bugs that would have cost them millions and millions of dollars, but they were too fucking stupid to see it. Because developers just, they get to pick what, and then their managers. This is the problem at Microsoft, is the managers are supposed to be developers themselves. Like at Microsoft, if you were in the dev discipline, the manager is supposed to be like a dev lead, right? He's supposed to be the best developer on the team. Therefore, he's the manager. But the problem is Microsoft would take these PMs and make them managers of the dev team. They would have a loose understanding of how programming works, but they wouldn't know how to formally read code properly. And what would happen is they'd defer to the developers for everything. So you'd be like, you'd open a bug saying, okay, well, this developer has a divide by zero error, because he's not checking something. Like all he's got to do is add this one line of code, fixes the thing. Now we'd never have to worry about this thing crashing if 100 connections fail. And they'd come back and be like, oh, I talked to the developer about it, and he said it's incredibly unlikely that you'll ever hit 100 failures in a row. So this is probably never going to happen. And I'm like, bitch, this happened. This is why I opened the bug. I literally hit this in last night's test run. Here's the stack trace. I didn't just go into your code and be like, oh, this is shitty code, fix it. I literally went and looked at the code because I hit this bug. And they're like, oh, was this in the lab? Oh, well, the lab has like unrealistic conditions that aren't going to be hit in the real world. And the manager would just defer to the developer, and the developer's the one that made the bug, and he doesn't want to admit he's wrong, because if he has to fix the bug and close it, that shows that he admits it was a bug, and the developers that have the most bugs against them at the end of the year usually don't get their bonuses, like the other guys. So it's in the developer's best interest to try to spin or push blame as much as humanly possible to make sure that they retain their rock star dev position. And you'd think
there is always a thing of like, it's like, I know it's not working, shut up. You know what I mean? Like this, I remember doing that, and even just doing like with websites and stuff. You build a website, there'd be something you'd be like, look, I just can't get it to do. And they'd be like, what? Yeah, but it's not doing this. Get it to line up. And you'd be like, no, you're an idiot.
And the other thing too is developers don't get along. Developers don't get along at Microsoft. Like they're all pitted against each other. I mean, again, granted, this is old information because, I was laid off like I think 7 years ago. But when I was at the company, even the last year I was there, the developers are pitted against each other because there's a stack ranking system in place. Every year you're allowed to give out so many promotions, given the total number of people in your team or your organization. So, and you have to pick those people that get the good grades, but you also have a certain amount of bad grades you have to give out. It's a sliding scale. So even if everybody on your team is equally good and everybody does a great job, you have to pick some people that are pieces of shit, people that just did their job, and people that are rock stars. And so it ends up getting to the point towards the end of the year where developers are like, oh shit, I fixed like 20 bugs this year. And Microsoft didn't look at it as, oh, we're going to reward you for fixing 20 bugs. They look at it as you were a shitty developer and introduced 20 bugs that needed to be fixed. So the developers would, instead of fixing their shit, they'd try to push blame off onto somebody else or get another developer to fix it upstream. And that happens so many times. I had a developer once, he had a bug in his code. I even went and got our rockstar developer, Eric, to look at it. He's a better developer than I am. He was literally like the dev lead for our entire team. I'm like, Eric, look at this. Am I going insane or is this correct? And he's like, no, that guy totally fucked up. That error right there is going to be hit. Like there is no question about it. He needs to fix this shit. And then Eric would have to message him and the dude would come back and be like, oh, I don't think it's my fault. The guy that's calling my API should do that check upstream. Like that's not my responsibility to check that at my level. Like he should be checking like my return value and then acting on it there. And then everybody would just push it further up the stack because if they could get some new developer to fix it higher in the stack, even though it was less efficient and it was a worse place to fix it, and that means every other fucking place that API is called is broken still, he would try to get it fixed for that one instance upstream because then it wasn't on him and he can close the bug is either give it to another developer and then he closes it as fixed, or he just closes the bug entirely and a new bug gets opened against the other developer. So it's a constant shift of blame. And this is why I think the Windows Update quality is so poor. Is one, they don't have internal test. Two, feature work is fine. If you introduce bugs in feature work, they don't give a shit. They only care about the bugs that you introduce and maintenance of the existing source code. Like if you take a piece of code that is relatively stable and you fix something in it and you end up breaking something else, that's like the worst thing ever. They literally come by and put a dunce sticker on your window of your office that's like, I broke the build. Like
broke Windows.
They would shame you for it. So developers were very scared to fix things. And I thought that was always a really bad cultural thing at Microsoft, is that developers literally would not fix their shit because they were afraid that if they had the most bugs that were opened or they couldn't fix them for whatever reason, or they introduced new bugs, that at the end of the year, they wouldn't get their bonuses and they wouldn't get their promos and they'd be the low man on Toto. And
so the culture was fighting it the entire time.
Yeah, put it this way. I had my boss walk in. I've only had 2 years out of the 15 that I was there where I got a review that just said that I was just doing my job, basically. Like the sliding scale is like 1 to 5. It used to be like 1 to 10, but 1 to 5 means that you fucking suck at your job. You're doing your job exactly the way you're supposed to, or you're going above and beyond. So I had a year where every year I went above and beyond. I was like really, really like ambitious when I was there. The whole time I'd work 24 hours a day. I'd work my weekends. I was really into it. I loved what I did. And my boss actually had to sit down with me and say, I'm really sorry, but I have to basically give you a rating that says you just did your job, even with everything else you did. And he laid the whole thing out for him. And he's like, listen, because if we give one more bad review to this guy who's also been doing a good job, he's going to get fired, because 2 bad reviews means you're gone. So we have to give you this review so that we can save enough on the bone to give him a review that says he just did his job. So now I'm on the same level as the lowest contributor because he's still contributing and he's still a good employee and we need to keep him. So I have to take a lashing for it. It's so fucking stupid. And that's the mentality. And I think that's why you get this quality of software, is because Microsoft works on this weird system where there always has to be a winner and there always has to be a loser. It's like this zero-sum game. It's ridiculous. So, and I don't, like I said, it's been 7 years. I don't know if they still operate that way, because I know they got rid of offices and they shoved everybody in cubicle farms and shit. So a lot of stuff changed after Satya
They're all working from home now.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I don't think the campus is open still. But yeah, it's weird when you look at it that way, because you're like, no wonder you're going to get shitty software out of this company. You're literally scaring developers to even touch shit. Like they're literally like, if a bug opens, they fucking have a panic attack. When like realistically, if you rewarded them for fixing this shit, they would be way more willing to fix it. And if you had the test team to catch them when they fell, which is what my job was, if a developer, fixed a piece of code, I was the guy that would take it, install it on the box, override, install the private binary, reboot the box, rerun the test scenario 1,000 times if that's what it took, and make sure it passed every single time. and make sure there was no performance degradation. Make sure that I didn't hit the original transient bug, or if it happened every time. Those were the easy bugs to fix. If it happened 100% of the time, you would definitely get that bug fixed. But
right, the random ones are the killer.
90% of the bugs are called transient, or they refer to them also as race conditions, right? They only happen every once in a while, and you can't tell when they happen. Those are the ones where the developers have some wiggle room, and they're like, well, you know, our test case hits it 500 million times. Like, whose workstation is going to get hit 500 million times on this port? And I'm like, everybody that gets DDoS streaming on Twitch. like, you know, it's like, there is a real scenario for this because I hit the bug. Oh, but that was just in testing, and we intentionally test the extremes. And it's like, well, why do we test the extremes if we aren't going to fix the shit when it breaks?
Right.
And so I will admit that out of my career at Microsoft, that was the thing that easily annoyed me the most. Was developers wouldn't take me seriously, and I would even fix their shit. David, I shit you not, I'm not exaggerating. I would say 1/3 of the bugs that I found, I would literally open the source code, check in a fix with a comment, and send the fix to the developer in the bug, and basically, you know, in nice words, say, I did your job for you. All I need you to do is check the code review this and approve my check-in.
Right.
And I swear to God, like 1 out of like 10 things I fixed actually got approved and made it in. The rest of it, the developer would come back and be like, oh, this is too risky because, or this is too risky, or this is going to slow it down, or, oh, this is going to create a performance issue, or this is going to, it's like, dude, the shit is crashing right now. Like, I literally have all the logs, all the evidence that shows that I can hit this bug, and it's going to crash the application service, or in some cases, blue screen the box if it was in a service that was critical. And they'd just be like, yeah, no, we don't, it's too high of a risk. Like, this is going to hurt performance. Like, this might actually make it take 2 nanoseconds longer, so I'm not willing to risk it.
And I'm like, that's just a corporate culture thing that has sort of permeated the entire process of updates. Wow, that is kind of terrifying, especially when you think about how many systems are running this OS.
And you do their job for, that's the thing is, like, I literally would do their job for them. All they had to do was click a link in Product Studio, and it would open up the CPP file inside of Visual Studio, and they would even highlight with a yellow line the lines that I changed, and they could literally look at the old code versus the new code, lines above, lines below, and just be like, you know what? That isn't going to break shit. That is the simplest fix ever. Just adding one extra
but Jerry,
check.
Then you would be right.
Then I'd be right. And if I'm right, that could affect their ability to get a raise at the end of the year. So they're, nah, fuck it, push it off on somebody else. And there was times where I did fix stuff upstream. I would literally just go up to code that nobody owned. Like, I'd go upstream until it was like a dude wrote this shit like 15 years ago and it's been untouched. And I would go in there and levy the fix, and then I would submit it to the manager, and the manager's like, they didn't know any better. They'd just be like, oh, okay, well, this fixes the issue. Did you test it? Yeah, sure. Okay, click. Okay. And they would take the brunt for it because the managers never got penalized for approving a check-in. Like, the managers were fine. It was the developers that got shit on for approving a check-in. So, so yeah, you just have to go upstream and literally look for code that nobody owned. Like that was actually a tactic at Microsoft. You can't get it fixed where it needs to be fixed. Then just go, it's like if you had a plumbing leak in your house and somebody's like, well, I don't think my sink is leaky. So you go down like 5 pipes under the house and like fix it there. Like, you're like, okay, I'm just going to divert the water here so it can't leak at the faucet because now I fixed it right here. Oh, but I own that pipe now. You need to go further. The next thing you know, I'm like 4 blocks down the road, and I'm like, oh, the dude that made this pipe like got fired 10 years ago or went and founded his own company. So now I can go fuck with that code all I want, and some manager's not going to know any better. It's not owned by anybody. Oh, now I remember. Never mind. I remember. If you touch a piece of code that nobody currently has ownership of it, you get tagged as the owner. So if you're a Microsoft employee, go into Git, because I don't think Source Depot exists anymore. Go into Git and look for the code ownership and see if you can find J.R. Berg, J-R-B-E-R-G. Any code that you find with J.R. Berg on it is code that with the exception of setrez.exe, which I wrote entirely. Every other one that you find is going to be a piece of code that I fixed, and because nobody owned it at that time, or it was assigned to somebody who no longer is with the company, I automatically reverted to ownership.
I've never thought of programming as political, but of course, why? I mean, of course it would be. When you get numerous people involved, there's politics to anything that involves numerous people, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's all politics.
Speaking of politics, the politics of this house will go horribly south if I don't go and walk a dog with my child and wife now.
Hey, bro, absolutely get after it.
It was get going too.
It was a pleasure having you guys. We're gonna go ahead and wrap it up right there.
This is amazing.
This has been so good.
Yeah, this. See, I love this. This is fantastic. This just works on so many levels.
Well, I have to go back to my I have to go to my C# programming again now. I got to go sort of like start brushing up on that.
Yeah, David, if you ever want, if you ever want to like just connect up on a Skype call and open up Visual Studio and just hammer out some real simple shit to show you like how powerful the language is, I've been trying to ramp back up for my CodeGasm series. So it'd be cool to just bounce some ideas off somebody who's not a proper C# dev already.
How about someone who hasn't a freaking clue?
Oh, dude, my entire Codegasm series assumes you know nothing.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Because I can't even, I mean, even just the IDE scares the crap out of me now. Like, I just like, good, they're so complicated.
I even made a video on how to install Visual Studio and how to create a project. Like, go do a search for Codegasm. There's 6 episodes. I guarantee you by the 6th episode, you're going to be dangerous. You're going to have the computer talking. You're going to have the mouse and keyboard moving around and doing shit with drunk PC. You're going to have a hard drive indicator running in your task tray. And this is all shit that you can write knowing nothing about C#, nothing about Visual Studio. I guarantee you. Like, I had people that don't even know what code is.
Installed on the PC, so on the old laptop. So I'll give it a go.
And all the source code's uploaded too. Like if you don't want to type it all out during the series, you can download it and just like play along with me.
It's not like my Commodore Basic days.
Exactly, like the magazine, right? Type in 500 lines of code and you get like an image of a surfer or something on a wave, and you're like, I did that. So I
got the asteroid of asteroids.
Yeah, message me anytime, man. That's shit. I would love to, like, if you have questions or you don't understand something in the video, I'd love to clarify it because that's going to help me be a better teacher when I bring Codegasm back.
Well, I'll go. Then I'll wade through that stuff, and that's great.
Yeah, have Baz do it too because I show enough to actually be really evil, and I'm sure it's shit he wants to fuck with you on. So.
It's a possibility I might be able to talk him to some stuff, but it's amazing how it's if Dad's interested, it's like a total turn off for him.
Dude, I made a program that literally makes your mouse seem like it's got a dirty sensor, and when you move it, the mouse just like jiggles and goes all over the place, even in a game.
Nice.
So if you install that, on Mo Bratlett's computer, he would go fucking postal, dude, wondering why.
He better not be listening. He might be listening.
If he's listening, you unlisten to that, and it's really easy to write. It's like I think it's like 20 lines of code, and compile that shit, run it, and you're doing cool stuff.
All right, I shall check in on Codegasm, and now I shall go and see my wife.
All right, take off, man. Get out of here.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing. I guess. Oh yeah, right. What am I doing? I guess I've got to hang up, don't I?
Yeah, you got to hang up. It's like an ex-girlfriend. You got you or a current girlfriend rather. You hang up first.
You hang up first.
Exactly. You're welcome back anytime, David.
Oh well, thank you. Yeah,
absolutely.
Look, whenever I'm free, I'm here. This is great.
Cool.
All right, lads. Later.
Hey, take it easy, man.
Thank you, everybody. Cheers.
Hey, Adam, thank you for the 50 Czech crowns. He said, watch him from the start, not live. I think the patent term of 20 years is quite excessive. It is. It's ridiculous. The patent term. Oh, look, we still got AuxxZillary with us. He's scored you. Dude, look at that smile on your face. How cool is this? We got to hang out with fucking David Hewlett for hours. How cool is that? Man. We can fangirl now because he isn't here anymore. So
I mean, it's what's cool is like it's I like that we haven't like totally like nerded out of like celebrity status or whatever. He's just another dude, talking nerdy stuff with us, and it's like it's so perfect. It's so awesome to have. It's such a good dynamic. This is a really good group.
This is,
man. I think we really hit on something great.
We did, and like I said, he's welcome back. I mean, I'm surprised he keeps coming back. Quite honestly, I'm like, oh my god, this is awesome. Like I keep messaging him, and I'm like, you're welcome to pop in. And then I get a message back. It's like, oh dude, I'll totally be there. Okay. And I'm just like, it's not something you'd expect from somebody who's like doing a movie, Well,
I think it's like the same. It's the same kind of concept of like that kind of group of friends who doesn't get to play Dungeons and Dragons except on with this. Otherwise, they have the clique. They all have their own lives and stuff, but like it's their one chance to really nerd out because their normal lives don't give them the opportunity, and this is one of those things, and I think it's super cool.
It is. The internet offers a pretty cool opportunity where it's like all things are equal. It's bizarre, but it is. It's like he's in here just sitting in his computer room. It's like there's no production, there's no light, there's no makeup, there's no plan. It's literally like this has got to be just as relaxing for him as it is to us. And it's like, it's hard to believe that from like a third party perspective. Like when you're fangirling over somebody, you're like, holy shit, this dude was fucking Rodney McKay in like every episode of Atlantis and on SG1. And it's like, this is a really well known character. You're like, what the fuck is he doing in here with a bunch of guys just like talking to some other guys about shit and CRISPR and programming? It's just so surreal. I
love it.
And the funny thing is, like, people say the same thing, like when they like if I have a connection with somebody online and we start doing something or I go on their stream, I get much of the same and I don't understand it, but I guess now I understand it because now I've done it, right? It's like this is my experience where it's like it's bizarre, man. It's bizarre, but it's welcome and it's awesome. And sir, you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too, man.
We're gonna go ahead and wrap it up here.
And you, audience, thanks very much.
Thank you for the support, guys. Right? You can check out anytime you want, buddy. let's see. Wait, have we asked David about Amanda? Oh, you want us to ask him about Amanda next time? Okay, well, maybe we will. Old Amanda tapping. I need some signatures, man. I need me a MacGyver signature. I need me a Samantha Carter signature. I got a lot of signatures that I need. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for all the support today. It was amazing having Tech Talk. We will see you next week. Same bat time, 10 a.m. Pacific, right here on the YouTubes. If you want to talk to us, otherwise come over to Twitter. That's probably our most active social network. All of our information is linked down below in the description. I'll make sure I get David's information in there for some reason if it's not there, because he seems to be a regular now on the show, which we love. And let's see, anything else? Oh, Twitch. If you want to watch us, we do Twitch streams too. That are quite a bit different than this independently. So if you want to watch us like during the week, that's where you'll find us, is over on the Twitch. And I dabble in TikTok and shit. So I'm like all over the place. I'm pretty.
The TikTok is hilarious,
dude. It's so hilarious. It's so hilarious. Like I can see why my wife just like spends like 8 hours a day on there. It's so addictive. Oh my God. All right, guys. Until next time, leave a comment, hit the like button, subscribe, and do all that other cool shit that every YouTuber tells you to. Today's video is sponsored by absolutely fucking nobody, because we do what we want. Doesn't mean we're not going to get sponsored in the future, though.
People like you.
Yeah, you are our sponsors until we can get Manscaped. Like, I don't know, give us some money and I'll shave my genitals or something. But we'll worry about that later. All right, take it easy, guys. Till next year.
Bye.